This dude, yeah, his name's Li Yi. He's pretty much a pro at mining in places that would make you want to suit up like an astronaut or maybe even a superhero. Every single day, he gears up and rolls the dice for one of his co-workers was chirping that this month was shaping up quite nice, claiming he could wipe out his family's debt in about a year. The guy went on to say that if Lee worked for 3 to 5 more years, he might even snag himself a sweet little apartment. Lee just retorted with a classic, "I'll keep grinding," but in his mind, he was throwing some serious shade at this hard work. 3 to 5 more years, no way Jose. In Lee's opinion, they were the ones who needed to punch in more hours. The radiation in this dimension gives regular folks a 1 in 1,000 chance to become an awakened one, but it can also transform them into a cautionary tale. Let's be honest, nobody willingly throws on a hazmat suit and dives into madness. As they cruised along, the two guys in front of Lee were gossiping like they were knitting circle grandmas. They recalled him as that poor kid whose parents had a nasty accident 3 years ago. Sure, he got some cash, but surprise, he ended up buried in debt. One of them even remembered how NG Corporation pulled a fast one, blaming Lee's parents for a $1 million loss. He felt for Lee, but his buddy brushed that off, saying the kid was soft for letting it happen. He joked that if he were in Lee's shoes, he'd take the corporation on in a Wild West showdown, guns blazing. His friend replied that getting revenge was pointless, since the parents were already toast. Might as well just chase some cash, am I right? Lee caught every word, especially the part about being weak. In his head, there are times a person can feel weak, not because they are, but because the world is a circus gone haywire. The moment came to get to work. Suddenly, the ground shook like it was hosting a dance party below. One guy yelled at them for squealing like babies over a little shake, but the other dude shot back that he'd never heard of earthquakes in other dimensions. Another chipped in, agreeing he'd been through a bunch of zones, and this was a first. They started speculating if monsters were throwing themselves a rave to stir up the noise. Definitely not the safest workplace when you've got interdimensional jerks known for crashing the party. Those monsters made the Bug and Beast clans look like cuddly kittens, so unanimously they decided to call it quits because, let's face it, too much danger is a hard pass. The boss tried to shush them. He reassured them that some awakened one had cleared the area 3 years ago, so there shouldn't be any humanoid surprises. But then just before he could finish his spiel, he got stabbed right in the middle. Everyone was stunned when the supervisor hit the ground. Lee froze like a deer caught in headlights. The supervisor was coughing blood like he was in an action flick. Then they saw it. The interdimensional humanoid had arrived. They all bolted with the monsters right on their tails. A few of them were already down for the count. Then his buddy got tossed at him and crashed into him like they were playing human bowling. The impact knocked the wind out of him. By the time he stood up, the others were speeding away in the vehicle. He shouted for them not to leave him behind, but the car zoomed off like it was in the Indy 500. Suddenly, an interdimensional humanoid jumped onto the vehicle. Lee figured out that the humanoids were targeting the folks in the truck. Then, boom! The truck exploded. He gaped in disbelief. The humanoid stuck in the fiery mess screeched like someone just swiped their last slice of pizza. Lee realized their weakness was fire. Just then, a humanoid charged at him from the right. Without a blink, he lunged for the burning wood, like it was the Olympic gold medal in a relay race. He waved it like a magic wand, praying for monster magic to keep it at bay. Miraculously, it paused, eyeing him like a cat with a laser pointer. He hollered that those creatures were scared of fire, and it was time for some classic torch-waving madness. 10 years back, mysterious gates popped up all over the planet. It was as if an all-you-can-eat buffet for insectoids, beasts, and humanoids from other realms had just opened up right on Earth. Only the awakened ones, those who muttered magical spells, think the arrival of these advanced beings didn't just give humans the chance to slam the gates shut. It ushered in a new era of wild exploration and hunting for otherworldly energy, like kids chasing after ice cream trucks. The catch: those miners weren't advanced beings. They were just everyday folks trying to scrape by, which took every bit of energy they could muster. They scoured the area for anything flammable to scare off the humanoids. One guy was sweating bullets, pointing out that their torch was not going to win any longevity awards. Lee suggested they check the storage for gasoline. They could block the entrance with fire until help arrived. They huddled together, forming a human barricade, and started backing away slowly. They were making headway until they reached the gasoline barrels. Once they got close enough, Lee shouted for everyone to pour it at the entrance like they were on a cooking competition. They kicked the cans and tossed their torches like they were launching fireworks. One torch landed right at a humanoid's feet, igniting it and turning that creature into a blazing fiasco. An old guy perked up and thanked Lee, swearing they'd owe him big time for saving his skin, because if it weren't for Lee, they'd be toast, literally. Just then, Lee's eyes caught something odd in the background. Just chilling, there was a giant statue. And then bam, the truck flipped over like a pancake at brunch. Ye had a light bulb moment realizing those interdimensional critters were after the folks in the truck. And just like that, the truck went kaboom surprise party. Anyone. The interdimensional clowns got blasted in the explosion, screeching like they just stubbed their toes on a coffee table. Ye figured out their Achilles heel. Fire spotting some fiery kindling nearby, he thought, what the heck, let's give it a whirl. Suddenly, wham, an interdimensional dude charged at him from the right. Ye didn't waste any time. He lunged for the burning wood, swinging it like a baseball bat to fend the creature off. And lo and behold, it actually stopped. He yelled to everyone that these creatures had a serious fear of fire. Flashback to 10 years ago when mysterious gates showed up everywhere like they were a new fashion trend. Insectoid, beastly, and humanoid weirdos came flooding into Earth like it was a never-ending buffet. It took awakened advanced beings with some serious radiation perks to stand a chance against these party crashers. Not only did these advanced beings hand humanity the keys to shut those gates down, but they also kicked off a wild era of scavenging energy from beyond the stars. But alas, the miners weren't sharpshooters. They were just regular folks trying to stay afloat. When it came to battling the gate monsters, they couldn't even gather enough strength to run. They scavenged whatever flammable junk they could find to keep the interdimensional buffoons at bay. One fellow was sweating bullets because the torch was flickering. Lee suggested they rummage through the storage for some gasoline, thinking fire might just block off the entrance until rescue arrived. They stood back to back, forming a human shield and creeping backward. Everything was going smoothly until they reached the gasoline drums. Once they were close enough, Lee yelled for them to dump it at the entrance pronto. They kicked those cans like they were at a soccer match and tossed their torches to ignite it. The torch took a dive into the gasoline puddle near an interdimensional dude, and whoosh! That creature lit up faster than a 4th of July fireworks display. An old man tipped his hat to Lee, saying they'd be toast without him. Since Lee saved his butt, they swore on their grandma's apple pie that they'd help him out if he ever found himself in a jam. Just then, Lee spotted something off in the background, an enormous statue looming over them. They'd be toast. Since Lee saved their bacon, they swore that if he ever needed a hand, they'd be there. Lee caught a glimpse of something behind him. It was a massive statue looming like an oversized rubber chicken at a parade. The guy sitting beside him mentioned they had stumbled on this ancient relic ages ago down in the mine. He speculated that Supervisor Wong was probably plotting to sneak it out and cash in big time on the black market. That's why it was just hanging out there chilling like a villain. Ye jumped in, pointing out it looked like it had been there since dinosaurs were the reigning champs of the earth. Out of the blue, they heard a voice crackle through the radio. They perked up, all excited for some news. Turns out their Turf Sector 7 had been ambushed by some folks who looked way too human and desperately needed a rescue team. The HQ radioed back that help would swing by in about 2 hours. They begged for a speedy response, but bam, the call dropped, leaving them with nothing but a bunch of static to keep them company. Fear kicked in as they realized their suits had enough juice for just another hour and a half. A few folks voiced their worries, saying they didn't want to bite the dust because they had a spouse and a kiddo waiting back at home. One dude regretted not bailing when he had the chance. Even if just one of them made it, it was better than sitting around waiting for the... He silently prayed for help to hurry up since his suit was running on fumes. Then one of his pals piped up, saying that since their suits wouldn't last until help arrived, some brave soul had to volunteer as tribute. He suggested it could be the older peeps or orphans. What a thought. Then he declared that Ye had no family ties and was drowning in debt. In his eye, they retaliated by clocking him with a plank and dared him to fight back. Ye dropped to his knees, feeling the pain shoot through him like a nasty bolt of lightning. They egged him on, daring him to resist. Then the guy choked him, explaining that if Ye got dosed with radiation, there was a slim chance he might just wake up. So really, he was being a good buddy. Another dude jumped in, claiming that if Ye did wake up, he'd be their new superhero. Ye crawled to grab his mask, managing to hiss that after Ye, they called up the next contestant. One guy shoved the other two forward as sacrifices. The two bullies chased him down when he tried to bolt. He scrambled up onto the truck trying to escape. He yelled at them that if they were going down as a team. He cranked the truck, and just like that, the statue on the back lost its balance and went kerplunk. They all scrambled after him to stop him from crashing through the fire barrier at the entrance, because if he made it, they were toast. They freaked out as the guy broke through the entrance and humanoids started spilling in. Ye was left sprawled on the floor looking hopeless. The statue fell right in front of him. Our boy gawked at the statue, wondering if it was actually snickering at him. It felt like it was having a good laugh at his expense. And lo and behold, this statue proudly donned a creepily charming grin. Oh boy, it reminded him of that statue from Solo Leveling, but not long after an interdimensional humanoid showed up and crushed the statue, reaching for Ye like he was a snack. Ye pondered why he had to endure all this nonsense. The humanoid's hand stabbed through his torso. He reflected on all those moments he was the punchline, like when his parents kicked the bucket and no one wanted to take him in, or when he got the boot from his house because he couldn't pay rent, or the debts that stalked him like a bad horror movie. Some big shots had come and threatened him when he tried digging into the details. The complaint letters he sent got tossed straight into the corporation's dumpster. He wasn't looking for cash. Nope, all he wanted was the unvarnished truth. But let's be real, the truth tasted bitter. He discovered that his wonderful parents had really messed things up and caused the accident. Not only were they refusing to cough up any compensation, but they were actually suing him for millions because of what they cost the company. He clenched his fists in fury. The man kicked him in the face, telling him he should have just signed that compensation agreement and pocketed a few tens of thousands, preventing all this mess. The man was fuming because now he had to hunt Ye down for the debt, which was piling up interest at $30,000 each month, with the principal needing to be settled in 3 years. He informed Ye that he'd send someone on the 15th of every month, and if the cash wasn't ready, they'd show up for a friendly visit. Ye looked utterly pitiful at this point, so the man thought he'd throw him a bone. He suggested Ye should become an interdimensional miner, since apparently that gig was the only shot he had at paying off his debt. Back to the present. Ye thought to himself that he was already a dead man walking, so if he was going out, he wouldn't do it quietly. He didn't care about weakness and refused to go down without a fight. With all the grit he could muster, he bit the beast like a rabid dog. The interdimensional creature tossed him away like yesterday's leftovers. As his vision faded, he couldn't help but think how rank the monster smelled. A shadowy figure remarked that it was a real shame he thought he'd uncover some hidden talent. But here he was, throwing a wild flail like a fish out of water before meeting his doom. Ye retorted that at least he gave it a whirl, unlike that poor excuse for a statue that got smashed under that beast, like yesterday's news. The statue cheekily told him he was the only one who could save himself if he decided to play nice and hand over his body. Ye shot back that he'd rather kick the bucket than be some freak's puppet. The statue cackled, saying how quirky it was that he'd choose death over being a puppet, calling Ye a fool for thinking he had the right to say no. The shadowy system kicked in. The interdimensional humanoid who had just flattened Ye looked utterly taken aback. The shadow commanded it to kneel. The statue had fully taken charge of Ye's body and was ready to settle the score with the humanoid who had stomped on him. The gigantic shadowy creature squished the interdimensional humanoid like a pesky bug. At this moment, our boy was entirely wrapped in dark armor. Ye grumbled that he was toast anyway, so he might as well throw a party for them. Forget being weak. He wasn't planning on going down without a fight. He bit the monster like a rabid dog on a mission. The interdimensional beast flung him aside like last week's discarded trash. As his consciousness slipped away, Ye couldn't help but think about how putrid the creature smelled. Then a shadowy figure piped up, saying it expected Ye to unlock some hidden talent. But nope, just a futile last hurrah before Mr. Grimm showed up. Ye shot back that at least he gave it a shot, unlike that statue which crumbled into dust under the beast's boot like it was nothing. The statue told him he was the only one who could save him if only he'd willingly hand over his body. Ye shot back that he wasn't interested. He'd rather kick the bucket than let something that looked like it crawled out of a dumpster pull his strings. The statue laughed, calling him a fool for thinking he could refuse. Suddenly, the shadow system kicked into gear. The interdimensional creature that had it out for Ye was completely caught off guard. The shadow commanded it to kneel. The statue was now in control of Ye's body, gearing up for some serious payback against the interdimensional beast that had crushed him. The enormous shadowy figure squished the creature like an irritating bug. By now, our hero was clad in shadow armor, all set for action. A humanoid behind him let out a growl that could wake the dead. Clearly, it was fed up with all the noise. Just then, a shadow popped up on the ground and gobbled up the interdimensional fellow like it was a midnight snack. Talk about a short-lived opportunity for the next poor soul. Ye was completely grossed out by the creature's stench. As for those human folks, he tied them up like a present. They were quaking in their boots at the sight of him. The statue couldn't help but wonder what Ye might do if it ever got its body back. They were practically begging him to have some mercy on them. They argued that they were just trying to stay alive, pointing out that without them, Ye wouldn't have even woken up in the first place. Oh sure, they admitted they may have been a tad too pushy, to get him roused. So Yi asked if he should go ahead and send them thank you cards now. The men quickly replied that there was absolutely no need for any gratitude and suggested they act like this whole fiasco never happened if he'd just let them go. Ye, being the big-hearted guy he is, said not only would he let them leave, he'd even personally help them make a speedy getaway. He ripped off their masks, and those poor dudes started coughing up blood. Once he wrapped up that little performance, he moved on to the next batch of troublemakers. One of the guys whined that he hadn't done a thing wrong. Suddenly, Ye dropped the batteries he'd snatched from them earlier like surprise. The statue whispered to Ye to keep his pity to himself. That would only land him in a world of trouble. Ye shot back, telling him to pipe down because he wasn't in the mood for any preaching. The shadow dared him to see how tough he really was when face to face with death. As he stepped out of the cave, he was met with a surprise party of humanoids he definitely didn't expect lurking outside. The shadow reminded him he had two choices: hand over his body or deal with the trash himself. The shadow was astounded that his legs were already shaking with all those faces in front of him. It was a sobering reminder that without his powers, he was nothing. Ye jumped to avoid an attack while scoffing that he wasn't keen on hearing any more of the shadow's life lessons. He kicked the humanoid's claw and was blown away by how light his body felt. The humanoid swung at him just as one of those sneaky critters tried to ambush him from behind. Luckily, he sensed it and dodged just in time. He could feel his reflexes and speed hitting turbo. The statue teased him, claiming that even with the shadow system, he was still a weakling. Ye packed energy into his fist and told him to hush. With one punch, he sent the humanoid creature flying. He was left scratching his head over this sudden power burst, knowing that just using his body for hits wouldn't be enough to take them out. He wished he had a weapon. And just like that, shadows gathered in his palm, forming a dagger that really surprised him. He thought, hey, let's test this bad boy out, and slashed at a target, finding he could take down hybrids too. He started to feel like maybe he'd finally leveled up. Just then, a humanoid landed a solid hit on his back. He quickly turned around and gave it a swift beheading. Thrilled to finally have some power to fight back, blood splattered everywhere. Ye collapsed, gasping for air. He had taken out all those creepy monsters. Then his system chimed in, announcing that his evolution was complete. He had leveled up to E rank. Cue the scene shift to Ye, sprawled out on a hospital bed, a nurse and doctor fussing over. The nurse reported that he was as healthy as a horse with 0 injuries and all vitals perfectly normal. They were left scratching their heads as to why he hadn't woken up yet. The doctor said that for an ascender, especially in Yi's case with his energy fully drained, it was nothing unusual. His body just needed time to adjust to the new level. Hearing Yi was an ascender perked the nurse's interest, and she asked what level he was. The doctor caught her enthusiasm and said they'd find out as soon as he woke up. He suggested, but she insisted on sticking around longer because she thought Yi looked quite handsome. Meanwhile, the shadow was having a meltdown, displeased about being stuck with a human, an E-rank one no less. He figured that with his mighty status and power, once Ye woke up, he'd at the very least hit S-rank or B-rank at worst. But here he was, with Ye floundering in an E-rank shell. Despite all this, he found Ye oddly fascinating, because even at E-rank, he had already tapped into the Shadow system's powers, and Ye finally started to wake up and asked why the Shadow was glued to him. The Shadow introduced itself as the ancient supreme entropy extinguisher and ruler of the otherworld realms. It commanded Ye to give up his body, promising fabulous rewards once he regained his throne from his clan's traitors. Ye thought it all sounded like utter nonsense. He shot back that there was no way he'd offer his body to something as gross as a cockroach. The Shadow was hopping mad. He demanded Ye hand over his body stat because that was his single reason for being. Ye wondered why this creature picked him out of everyone. Was it some sort of evil spirit possession? Or maybe it was just smitten with his stunning good looks. But with the Shadow's clearly loony personality, Ye knew better than to poke the tiger. At one point, he even worried the Shadow might try something funny, with him something he figured he could handle. What really made him uneasy was not having... The Shadow snapped back, questioning what kind of nonsense was going through his mind. It lamented having to settle for this E-rank human. If it weren't such an urgent situation, it would have preferred partnering with a cranky old dog over this E-rank scrub. The Shadow declared he had 3 days. If he didn't reach D-rank by then, it would obliterate him. Ye was completely baffled because according to his understanding, he was in a hospital, yet this Shadow tossed him into a portal like it was just another Tuesday. The Shadow explained. And once he smashed those usurpers of his clan and took back his throne, he'd shower Ye with rewards. Ye thought this guy was living in a fantasy land. He insisted there was no way he'd give his body up to something that was ranked at the same ugly level as this cockroach. The Shadow was seeing red now. It pressed Ye to surrender his body right away, insisting that was the one and only reason it was even in the picture. Ye scratched his head, wondering why this entity was so fixed on him. Was it a form of demonic possession, or did it simply have a crush on his good looks, given the Shadow's unpredictable vibes? Ye wised up to the fact that poking the bear was a bad idea. At one point, he almost feared it might try to take advantage of him, which he thought he could handle. What genuinely threw him for a loop, however, was that he had no clue what gender the entity was. His mind went into some weird places which seemed to annoy the Shadow. The Shadow shot back, asking what kind of whack thoughts he was having. It lamented picking this bottom-tier E-rank human. If it hadn't been such a dire situation, it would have preferred partnering with a stubborn old dog over this E-rank trash. The Shadow said he had 3 days. If he didn't level up to D-rank in 3 days, it would wipe him off the planet. Ye was flabbergasted. Based on what he understood, he was in a hospital, but somehow there he was getting tossed through a portal by this Shadow. The Shadow told. Ye found himself amidst a buffet of bugs, squaring off against the E-rank initiation of his clan on the flip side of that mystical portal. Apparently every Skyborn clan member only gets one shot at this hilarious adventure once they reach adulthood. Now that he was rocking the Ye 2.0 model, his trial reset button had officially been pressed out, came a heavy-duty armor beetle. Ye did a classic double take. Who knew he could recognize these creepy crawlers? The Shadow piped up, claiming it was just reading from his brain's Wikipedia page. It expected him to adjust to this like it was an old sock. Ye pondered this Shadow system. He was shocked at how zippy he felt. The beetle hissed like it was stuck in traffic. Knowing the bug's secret blind spots, Ye took a leap higher than a toddler on a trampoline to smack it on the back and landed like a total pro behind the critter. But the beetle wasn't having any of that. It swung back harder than his Aunt Gertrude on taco night. Ye had to stab his dagger into the ground like it was a stake just to keep his balance. Who knew bug shells could be so tough? The Shadow always, the critic called him useless. Then it hit him with the question, was Ye just relying on muscle? Ye snapped back that how he handled a fight was his own business, thank you very much. The Shadow smugly warned him not to come crawling back for help when he inevitably flubs this one. Ye could practically feel his annoyance bubbling up like a pot on a stove. He thought, does this beetle even have a weak point? It bat away his attacks like they were pesky flies and blasted him into a wall. Oof! Ye noticed a gooey substance sticking to his shoulder like an unwanted sticker. The Shadow yelled for him to get off the ground and make a grand comeback. Ye realized that goo was beetle blood. He smirked at last, uncovering its Achilles heel. As the beetle charged at him like a bull, Ye was ready to show who the real scaredy cat was in this dance. The Shadow was flabbergasted that he had activated Shadow Eyes. Ye managed to chop off some of the bug's limbs. The Shadow teased him by asking what was the point of breaking just one leg. Ye fired back that missing one of its front legs for defense would make hitting its weak spot a total cakewalk. Plus, he needed a fancier weapon for that, so he transformed. He jabbed the beetle's belly to get it to stand up. Turns out the beetle was lying low because its soft spot was hiding right in its gut. He was panting, but hey, he turned defeat into a victory dance. The beetle dropped a shiny crystal like a participation trophy. The shadow couldn't resist ribbing him for gasping for air after taking down an E-rank shield bug. Just then, Ye felt a surge of energy coursing through him. He absorbed the crystal, discovering it was an experience booster. The system perkily chimed in about a 0.2% boost toward leveling up to D rank. The shadow casually informed him that it was an energy stone, giving his skills a zap of potential. Ye sensed something sneaking up, but saw nothing. The shadow suggested he should have unleashed his shadow eyes again. When he asked what that was, the shadow replied that he just needed to focus his shadow energy into his peepers to ignite the shadow eye skill. He gave it a whirl, and bam, shadow eye level 1 was activated. Suddenly, a creature started hurling spikes his way. Talk about terrible timing. When one of the spikes lodged itself into a rock, it oozed bubbly green goo like it needed a spa day. Ye was like, "What the heck are those darts?" He sensed another attack was coming, dodging like he was auditioning for the Olympics. He raised an eyebrow, questioning if the shadow eye was defective, since he couldn't see clearly. The shadow quipped back that it wasn't broken. The shadow chuckled at Ye, a tiny E-rank managing to wiggle shadow energy around with such flair. Eventually, he caught sight of a warping sword bug called the Head Harvester and a stinger launcher that specialized in toxic darts from afar. Both were E-rank, and the shadow noted he was finally getting cozy with his knowledge base. But Ye was not too thrilled. They were swarming like he was at a shindig, and the uninvited guests just wouldn't leave. He remembered hearing a human say, "If you see one cockroach, it means there's a whole party of them lurking in the shadows." The shadow gave him props for strategically dodging the horde. He aimed daggers in both hands, giving them a death glare, while pumping up some seriously powerful energy, hollering. The shadow was all kinds of shocked that he had already unlocked the second phase of Shadow Eyes. Honestly, it was impressive for a mere E-rank. With Shadow Eye Level 2, his shadow became his trusty guide, and every enemy heartbeat rang the death knell for them. The system flashed his stats. He was an E-rank armed with a shadow system, and his skills included Shadow Knowledge Base. He noticed the bugs had slowed down their pace significantly. They were lagging by at least half, with purple spots shimmering on their bodies, triggering his curiosity about their weak spots. The system trumpeted that those vulnerabilities were logged. The shadow chimed in that this was a perk of achieving Tier 2 in Shadow Eyes. Once he spotted the sweet spots breaking through their defenses, he figured out those pesky bugs had their weak points hidden away. Ye launched an attack called Shadowthorn Great Burial, summoning spikes from the ground that skewered the bugs like they were on a shish kebab. This technique was like throwing a shadow shindig, sending spikes upward and wreaking havoc like nobody's business. The system kept pestering him with notifications about his progress. He quickly realized that each bug was only giving him a measly 0.7% of that breakthrough value. Now that he had outsmarted their defenses, he was prepped to yank this bug circus to a close. He planned to take them all down in one fell swoop. As he sliced through them, the system kept yapping about his progress. He hadn't anticipated that just hitting Shadow Eye Level 2 would sharpen his attack precision like this. Suddenly, a long, green, slender monster launched at him like a missile. The shadow nodded, excited about his quick reflexes, but lamented that his brain was lagging a bit. He needed to find a solid spot to dodge the swarm. He glared at the monsters while gripping daggers in both hands. Then he unleashed a wave of powerful energy, hollering at those creepy crawlies to take a hike. The shadow was thoroughly impressed that he had already awakened his Shadow Eye's second form. Quite an achievement for a lowly E-rank. In Shadow Eye Level 2, the shadow became his guiding star, and every heartbeat of his foes was a death bell. The system flashed his stats. He was labeled as an E-rank with a shadow system boasting abilities like Shadow Knowledge Base, Shadow Eye Level 2, and Shadow Transformation. He noticed the bugs' movements had grown sluggish all of a sudden. They were moving at half the speed they were earlier, and he could see some purple spots on their bodies. He started to wonder if those might just be their Achilles' heels. The system rang in that the weakness had officially been recorded. The shadow chimed in, bragging that hitting Tier 2 with his Shadow Eye changed the game entirely. Once he identified the sore spot, he could bulldoze right through their defenses. It hit him that those little critters had their own hidden weak spots. He unleashed a move called Shadowthorn, epic burial where shadows erupted from the ground, sending spikes that turned the bugs into pincushions. This move sends shadows deep into the earth and then shoots them upwards, causing a real ruckus. The system buzzed non-stop with updates on his advancement. He realized that each bug now only gave him a pitiful 0.7% breakthrough value. Now that he had a grip on their vulnerabilities, he was pumped to get the show on the road. He planned to wipe them out in one fell swoop. As he sliced through them, the system kept buzzing about his climb in progress. He never imagined just leveling up his Shadow Eye to 2 could skyrocket his accuracy like this. Out of nowhere, a long green slender beast came charging at him. The Shadow was amazed at his lightning-quick reflexes but felt a twinge of sympathy that his brain seemed to be lagging a bit behind. After giving it a good old once-over, he realized it was just a bug with a warped sword, not gonna lie. The Shadow was pretty impressed when he turned that Shadow Dagger into a whip. Talk about some magic tricks. The bug let out a hiss, like it was auditioning for a horror movie when he swung the Shadow around it. He dared it to leap again, and before you could say squash, he took its head clean off. The system was taking notes on the weak point of this warped sword bug like it was in class or something. Out of nowhere, the other bugs decided to form a bug army and attacked him with their stingers. Ye let the Shadow morph one more time, and he whipped up some ropes from the Shadow and yanked those warped sword bugs down faster than a pro angler hauling in a catch. The Shadow cheekily pointed out that he was finally starting to look like he deserved this power, even if he was posing like one confused scarecrow. The gift from the Eye of Shadows cranked up his senses, reflexes, strength, and shadow control, hence the cool name, Gift of Shadow Eye. His D-rank breakthrough progress climbed to 34.2%. But here's the kicker. This gift was gnawing through his mental energy like a hungry hippo. Ye was reaching his breaking point. Ye's vision got all fuzzy. He felt a bug slash him from behind like a ninja on a mission, but brushed it off. He was not going down, especially since he finally had a shot at getting back at those who wronged him. A timer popped up at 152,842. Ye couldn't help but think of those losers in the NG group who hid the truth about his parents' deaths, shamelessly shoving him into mining to pay off what they claimed was a debt. His progress continued to rise even as time slipped away like butter on a sizzling pan. But he soldiered on, fueled by newfound power, vowing to flip the script and never back down. He was hell-bent on dragging those arrogant jerks down to the fiery depths. He swore to make them kneel and beg for forgiveness at his parents' graves. With just 2 minutes and 15 seconds left on the clock, his D-rank breakthrough progress hit 95.4%. The Shadow observed all his pent-up frustration, which fit right in with the Shadow system, and even fed it more energy. Time was running out, so he urged Ye to pick up the pace. The timer ticked away until there were only 7 seconds left. The Shadow noticed Ye was about to unleash all that Shadow energy in one epic blast. He stopped to ask if Ye was nervous that his body might go kaboom. With merely 3 seconds to go, he could almost taste that breakthrough, and he was ready to do whatever it took to get stronger. With 1 second left, he unleashed a surge of energy that could wake up the neighbors. At long last, the timer hit 0. He soared through the air like a launching rocket as his sword exploded with energy. In that one powerful swing, he squashed all those bugs and hit a perfect 100% D-level breakthrough rate. Just like that, he got promoted to Del. Man, he was wiped. The Shadow teased that he barely squeaked by nicknaming him Little D. He took a glance at the bug bodies and spotted a weapon. The Shadow filled him in that the insect nest was once a beginner trial field for his kind. By human standards, that dagger was top-notch. Ye scratched his head, puzzled, pointing out that it looked more like a massive sword than a dagger. This got him thinking if all those Shadow folks were giants. The Shadow quickly retorted that according to his energy, those weapons were just peanuts. Ye wasn't buying it, though. He decided to tuck them away for now. The Shadow asked if they could be used for anything else, to which he replied he was planning on selling them, fully aware that only D-level awakeners could unload equipment. So he figured a pit stop at the registration hall was key. When he arrived, Ye was shocked to find out he ranked at E-level. The receptionist explained that while his physical stats were decent, there was no energy fluctuation detectable, hence the E-level. Plus, his status showed he was a minor, which scored him a 50. Ye joked that the shadow system was the real deal. The shadow shot back that it was just the human limitations that couldn't pick up on shadow energy. Thinking it over, Ye realized being under the radar had its advantages, but it sure made selling gear on the shady black market a challenge. The shadow grinned, pointing out that it was fitting for a shadow system. Ye snuck inside like a sneaky ninja. The gossiping crew didn't notice him at first until someone blurted it out. The shadow cackled, saying humans were a hoot. They bling up some iron with gems and strut around calling it divine gear. Suddenly, he felt a twinge of sympathy for Ye. A man looked down at Ye, acting all snobby, dismissing him for being a minor and assuming he couldn't afford anything. Ye shot back, asking if that was how he treated his customers. The man scoffed, doubting Ye could even be a customer and questioning what he could possibly afford. Our MC snapped back that he didn't want any of their junk. He whipped out the great sword and demanded their appraiser take a look at its worth. Just then, a woman latched onto a guy's arm, whining about why he dragged her to a stinky place. The man was Joe Ting, a D-level, and the woman was Suching, a regular civilian. The shopkeeper ditched Ye to fawn over Fancy Pants Joe. He asked if Joe had anything valuable to sell. Ting grinned, saying he scored a pretty sweet sword from the Otherworld Gate that he planned to sell for a shiny new car for his girlfriend. The shopkeeper's eyes practically sparkled at the mention of the Wind Howl sword. That weapon packed a punch for attacks. It was all the rage among the D-level crowd. Ye recognized Suching immediately, and she looked like she'd seen a ghost when she spotted him. When his parents had died, and he got nothing in return, she had turned her back on him. She'd been anything but forgiving during their last run-in. Ting noticed her weird reaction and asked if she knew him. She quickly denied it, fibbing that he was just a fan because she was an influencer. Ting shot Ye a seriously annoyed glare. So meet Joe Ting lounging in the D-level lounge while the lady by his side is Suching your typical civilian. The shopkeeper ditched Ye and blew over to serve the young master Joe, inquiring if he had anything of worth to sell. Ting proudly announced he snagged a pretty sweet sword from the Otherworld Gate and was looking to cash in to surprise his girlfriend with a new ride. The shopkeeper instantly recognized it as a Wind Howl sword. This weapon gave a little boost to attack power and was all the rage in the D-level scene. Ye spotted Suching and was hit with a wave of dread upon seeing her. Memories of her abandoning him when his parents died and the fact that he got nothing back flooded in, and their last encounter was anything but cordial. Ting turned to her asking if she recognized him. She quickly concocted a fib claiming he was just a fan since she's an influencer. Not the reaction he hoped for. Ting was totally miffed at Ye and roasted him by calling him a heap of junk. He shot back, "Hey pal, the landfill's just around the corner. Don't you want to take your trash there before it closes for the day?" He basically hollered at him to get lost. He attempted to take a swing at Ye with the sword he had planned to sell, but instead, he ended up wrecking his beloved blade. His eyes bulged out like saucers as he watched his sword shatter like his hopes and dreams. Ye casually noted that it was his sword that truly belonged in the junkyard. Chin, wide-eyed, questioned what happened when he bragged about how that sword sliced through air like a hot knife through butter and should be worth a fortune. Ting, losing his marbles, threw a punch at Ye. Ye noticed that Ting had about as much speed as a sloth taking a vacation. He smoothly dodged the punch, avoiding it like he was in an awful dance-off. Ting commented that Ye's skills were surprisingly impressive. He swung again, but Ye kept bobbing and weaving like he was in a dodgeball tournament. In Ye's head, those punches were moving slower than molasses in January. Definitely not as speedy as the challenges back at the insectoid nest. Ting's frustration was rising because he thought Ye was just some nobody, but still, he couldn't land a hit on him, not even with his so-called dank strength. He clenched his fist, all sorts of worked up. Ye conjured a shadow whip that wrapped around Ting's fist. Ting yelled at him, claiming that a miner should just crawl back to the mines. He wondered if a dog should even be wandering around up top. He yanked the shadow whip, leading to Ting taking a less than graceful tumble to the ground. Ting started to worry about her pal. Ye teased him, saying he seemed to have a real knack for playing dog. Ting's anger hit an all-time high, and he charged at Ye. Out of nowhere, a dude and his two bodyguards barged in, telling them to cool it. Ting was stunned to see Boss Wang. Wang, the big cheese sporting a D-rank status and a supervisor badge, told Ting that even though he was a regular customer, brawling in his shop was a bit much. Ching defended that the blasted miner smashed Ting's sword, which was what ignited this whole fiasco. Boss Wang turned his scrutiny towards the miner. He asked if Yi really wrecked the sword. Ye explained he was just responding in kind. So if that sword got wrecked, that certainly wasn't on him. Wang raised an eyebrow, probing if that was the whole truth. He leaned in and whispered that the weapon in the kid's hand looked anything but average. He wondered if the same rules were in play here. Ting nodded along since he'd score both cash and the item for Wang. Wang told Yi that he'd act as the middleman. He asked if he could check out the sword first. Once he laid his hands on it, his jaw dropped. The sword weighed over 100 pounds, and Ye lifted it like it was a mere feather. He began to think maybe Ye was more than just a miner. He wanted to test the waters, so he asked him where the weapon came from. Ye shot back with, "Since when did the black market start doing ID checks and wanting to know an item's backstory?" Wang shrugged it off, claiming he was just curious, and that if Yi didn't want to spill the beans, that was all right too. Ye casually replied that he stumbled upon the sword while mining. With that, Wang figured he was just your typical run-of-the-mill miner. He inspected the sword and declared it sturdy, but lacking any flashy features. At best, it could fetch a few hundred. Meanwhile, if Ting's sword wasn't demolished, it would rake in over 2 million. Wang informed him that considering Yi was just a miner, he must have had a rough time in life. Therefore, he'd buy the sword, and Yi would only need to pay Ting 2 million, while Wang would cover the difference. He made it sound like he was handing out a generous gift to Yi. He proudly announced it as his good deed for the day. Then he asked Ting if he was on board. Ting nodded since he was scoring cash. Ching jumped in saying there's no way a miner could have 2 million and reminded him of his promise to buy her a car. Ting whispered to her that he could always sell his organs to scrape together 2 million. With that, Ching hopped on board with their little scheme. Ye sensed they were cooking something up. Wang challenged Yi, asking if he had a problem. He grinned and told them that the one with an issue wasn't just him. Then he started radiating shadows everywhere, like he was hosting a dance party. Wang's thugs lunged at Yi. Wang claimed that a pointless scuffle wasn't worth his time. He suggested they head to the waiting room and cool off for a while. Ting was cool with that, but suddenly a guy went flying right past them. Wang reminded this guy named Bo to watch himself, because if he broke the merchandise, he'd owe some serious cash. Ye kicked the other two goons, sending one of them on a direct flight toward Ting, who swiftly booted the guy before he could turn into a human wrecking ball. He commented that mining really toughened him up. Ye turned to Ting and said, "Your turn now." Ching was bewildered, wondering when he turned into a fighting machine after being labeled just a miner. Ting admitted that his game wasn't half bad, and he could take down some low-level guys, but he grumbled that in front of a D-rank advanced guy, he was still just a pile of trash. Yi raised his hand and smacked the taste right out of him. Ting's ire flared, especially since not even his old man dared to slap him. He swore he'd make Yi pay. He hurled a beam toward Yi, but Ye casually swatted it away with just his hand. The way he blocked it left Ting scratching his head, trying to understand what just transpired. It felt like there was an invisible brick wall. Ye told him that since his dad didn't teach him a lesson, he'd take it upon himself to show this ungrateful punk what's what. Ting panicked and yelled for him not to come any closer. Ching couldn't believe that Ting, a D-rank advanced, could actually lose to a minor. Lesson. Ting, feeling the fear settling in, yelled at him not to come any closer. Ching was perplexed that Ting, a D-rank advanced, could be in danger from a minor. Ye morphed the shadows into a spiderweb, ensnaring both Ting and Ching. Ting finally realized Yi wasn't just another miner. He pondered if he was a C rank or B rank. Yi simply replied, "I'm just an E rank miner certified by the guild." Ting couldn't wrap his head around that. He raised his trembling hand. Ting yelled that he was a member of the Black Panther gang, and if Yi laid a finger on him, he'd be in some serious trouble. Ye recognized the gang as a bunch of loan sharks. Ting replied with a sheepish, "Yes." So Ye wasted no time and pounded him relentlessly while Ching screamed like a banshee. The impact of a well-placed punch sent Ting crashing into the wall, and he ended up coughing up some blood like a scene from a low-budget horror flick. Ye casually mentioned that the one thing he despised the most in the world was those pesky loan sharks. Just then, like a ninja flunking out of action school, Wang jumped in from behind, but Ye gave him a little shove, telling him to beat it. Ting, trying to play the peacekeeper, tossed out 100,000 yen like it was confetti. He lamented, questioning if that meant he was only worth 2,000 yen per slap. In a moment of frantic desperation, Ting threw out 1,000,000 yen just to make the slapping come to a screeching halt. Yi, fully aware that these guys were all about the high interest rates, thought why not get in on the money-making madness too. He declared that those 50 slaps from earlier were merely the interest, and now it was time to collect the big bucks, the principal. Ting whipped out his black card and slammed 5,000,000 yen on the table like it was a royal flush, insisting they take the whole stash. Our main character took one look at it and realized it was a VIP card from the NG group. A light bulb flickered in his brain. Those debt collectors and the ones pushing him into the mines were cut from the same cloth. Once he pieced it all together, he decided to let Ting off the hook and draw the snake out of its hole. He snatched the card, declaring it only fair since the Black Panther gang had drained millions from him over the years. So really, taking the card was like returning the cash to its rightful owner. Ching helped Ting up, asking if he was still in one piece. She reminded him that she had warned him he was just a minor. Defending herself, she claimed she didn't realize he had acquired so much power. Ting, feeling a tad betrayed, smacked her and scolded her for making him lower his guard. He was fully aware that getting his money back was going to be a tougher challenge than a game of chess with a pigeon. He picked up. The guy on the other end had just finished playing whack-a-mole with some thugs and answered in an annoyingly cheerful voice. Ying had called his brother Panther, seeking some muscle. Apparently someone had just stolen the prize sword he was planning on gifting him and even dared to threaten the whole Black Panther gang. How rude. Panther told him to send the details over. Meanwhile, one of Panther's minions reported they had bagged the thieves. They curiously asked what to do with the small-time crooks they caught. Panther smirked and asked if they had any of those so-called humans in the bunch. When they replied, nope, he ordered them to chop up the bodies into tiny little pieces. Panther informed his minion that the kid Ting had reported was a catch of his own. Now, a shiny new entry popped up in the Shadow knowledge base about the NG group. Turns out it was a massive multinational corporation and the real culprits behind Yi's parents' untimely demise. The following day at the guild, a dude strolled up to Ye asking if he needed help. Ye shrugged like he just didn't care and said he was merely hunting for a task that suited his skills. An E-rank task, to be exact. The other guys overheard and chuckled, telling him he was hopelessly lost in the territory where even the beginner tasks were still a dumpster fire. They laughed and warned him that he might. Someone piped up laughing at how an E-rank was trying to play tough guy. One fellow added that the E-rankers were like leeches feeding off the stronger folks. They told Ye to take a hike and loiter outside for a team that might actually need him. The crowd snickered, saying he should hang out by the dumpster since he was well dumpster level. Ye was fuming that those disgusting loan sharks snagging a task was now his #1 mission. Suddenly a figure walked in and the vibe completely shifted. Everyone felt like they were grass in a storm. This person had to be at least B rank. The powerful presence of this B rank made it tough for anyone to move. It was a woman rocking silver hair, cat ears, and a blaze in Yi's eyes. The classy aura she radiated made her come off like a privileged princess, and he didn't detect any hints of murderous intent. He mulled over whether she was just skilled at hiding it. It struck him as peculiar how she was extravagant yet restrained at the same time. A dude with a black mask announced there was a D-rank task up for grabs at the Beast Abyss, needing a D-rank advance worker. He asked if anyone was interested. The crowd couldn't help but notice that Ye was unfazed while everyone else was shaking like jelly. You'd think an E-rank would be flat as a pancake by now, but Ye stood there like a rock. Ye realized he was the only one keeping his cool. The woman noticed him too, completely unfazed despite being just a kid. The guild staff recognized her and said her name was Chin from Longman 3rd Street. He told her they had plenty of D-rank tasks available. She declined, stating she was more interested in Ye. The guild staff, wide-eyed, informed her that it was against the rules since he hadn't even registered yet. She shot him a look that could freeze fire and insisted she was the law. Firmly, she repeated that she wanted him leaving the staff with no choice but to bend the rules. Ye obediently trailed after her while the guild staff gawked in disbelief. This was the first time they had seen her personally choose someone. He couldn't help but be curious about what kind of backstory this miner had. A few hours later, a massive muscle-bound monster with horns horns decided to make a grand entrance. The bard began to serenade them with his flute. In their squad, they had frontliners, damage dealers, and support a well-rounded crew. In Yi's opinion, Minotaurs were no big deal. He watched them brawl and could easily see they were in sync, especially since a B rank was steering the ship. It looked like everything was going peachy. But when he activated his Shadow Eye, he spotted Minotaurs lurking beneath the surface that were way more ferocious than D rank. He found himself scratching his head, puzzled as to why the others couldn't sense it. His shadow informed him that his Shadow Eye had reached Tier 2, and his sensory perception was light years ahead of those clowns. Ye knew that even if the others were oblivious, the B-rank rich girl had to catch on. He speculated if she was purposely keeping it under wraps for some mysterious reason. The bard reported back to Chin, revealing that the starlight crystal vein she'd been hunting for was hiding down there. She waved her hand for the miner to follow her. Yi was flabbergasted. Did she really know how dangerous it was? So Ye decided to follow her. You could practically hear the jaws drop at the guild. This was the first time anyone had seen her actually pick a sidekick. Naturally, he was dying to know what kind of saga this level 1 had hidden up their sleeve. A few hours later, a massive muscle-headed monster with horns showed up uninvited. The bard whipped out his flute and started to serenade the crowd. Their team was loaded frontliners, heavy hitters, and support, basically a squad you'd want in any fantasy adventure movie. In Yi's mind, Minotaurs were just fuzzy old news. He saw them in action and could tell they had a rhythm going, especially with a B rank in charge. Everything seemed fine and dandy. But when he turned on his Shadow Eye, he spotted some Minotaurs sneaking around that were definitely above D rank level. It left him scratching his head why the others didn't pick up on that. His shadow whispered that his Shadow Eye had leveled up to Tier 2, and he was sharper than all those like wannabe heroes. Ye thought that even if the rest were clueless, the B-rank gal must have caught on. He wondered if she was hiding it for some cloak and dagger reason. The bard updated Chin about the starlight crystal vein she'd been hunting for being in there. She waved for the level 1 to tag along like it was no biggie. Ye could hardly believe it. She knew it was risky, but she was dragging the kid along for a wild ride. As they continued, the eerie vibe grew stronger, and he started to wonder if she cared whether the kid or her buddies ended up towing the line. Or maybe she thought her snazzy B-rank abilities could keep everyone safe and sound. Suddenly, the ground shook like it just had a caffeine rush. Ye and Chin went tumbling down into a pit. Thankfully, they landed on their feet. Talk about a lucky break. Ye caught sight of something ahead. It was a D-rank Minotaur beast man. He watched her whip out her sword and guessed what was about to unfold. Her crimson aura formed eyes that seemed to glare right through him, but she didn't move an inch. Instead, she ducked behind Ye and told him she'd cover him, so he better get going. Ye had to remind her that he was just a kid. She went all flushed, her knees wobbling, and told him to get out there. Ye couldn't believe his ears. She's a B rank, but she won't step up to the plate, and expects a measly E rank like him to take charge. Ye had less than zero motivation to risk life and limb, especially for chump change. But then, she dangled $1 million like it was a shiny morsel. He replied that if cash was the name of the game, he would grit his teeth and do it. He pulled out his dagger and got ready to jump into the fray. 3 Minotaurs came charging at him all at once. One decided to tango, while the other 2 zoomed by, heading straight for Chin. Ye's heartbeat raced. He was picturing that million. She conjured a red aura and blasted them away. He was taken aback by her move. He had totally misjudged her abilities. A Minotaur leapt at her, and Ye rushed in to save her, slashing the monster away. He teased her about having a face that says, "I want to be hated." But when he glanced back, she was already bolting. He sliced through the Minotaurs while telling her she was hopeless. She was panting like she just ran a marathon. Just when she thought she was in the clear, surprise, a Minotaur lurked right behind her. She spun around wide-eyed, wondering why this big guy wasn't scared off. The Minotaur hoisted its wooden club high. Ye found it odd that she wasn't fighting back even when she had the power to. Her bracelet lit up and a barrier popped up around her, blasting the Minotaur away. Sadly, her bracelet shattered. Ye realized that was a protective charm, and her earlier badass move wasn't entirely her own doing. He asked if she was a non-combat type advanced. She flushed and admitted it was true, begging him to keep it on the down low. He replied that it would cost her extra. More Shadow Eye Level 2 activated. He spotted a shadowy figure sneaking around. It was doing some kind of stealth magic. That was why he hadn't sensed it before. The Minotaur's strange behavior was being influenced by those bizarre fluctuations. Chin called for him as a Minotaur came near her. He sliced its head clean off, but trouble was knocking at his door, with even more Minotaurs closing in. He couldn't use area skills without risking Chin getting caught in the crossfire. If he didn't take care of them fast, he'd be toast since the Minotaurs seemed laser-focused on Chin. He thought about bailing on her. He told her since her protective charms had run out and she was a non-combat type, she better keep her eyes peeled for ambushes. That made her blush like a ripe tomato. She couldn't believe he actually said that out loud. A shadowy figure emerged behind her. The man drew his knife. He was fretting that a mere kid almost spoiled his plans, but he still saw an opening to take her down. Turns out the dude was a bard. He looked shocked. Ye relayed to Chin that the bard had been using infrasound to control the Minotaurs to go after her. She was floored to learn it was Ludin. Ludin chuckled, completely clueless that he had just stepped into the trap set by a level 1. He told Ye that he hadn't lost yet. He gathered red energy from the Minotaurs and formed a gigantic, misty red Minotaur. He wanted to show exactly how terrifying a control type could be. From the aura, Ye guessed he was a C-class. Chin was astonished that Ludin had absorbed the Beastman's life force to pump himself up. Suddenly, lava surged from the ground. She guessed he was leveling up to a C-class lava Minotaur. Yi couldn't wrap his head around how he leaped from D-class to C-class in one quick jump. The hype was so intense, he felt like a little fish in a gigantic pond. A C-class lava Minotaur loomed over Yi and Chin, both stuck firmly in D-class territory. The Minotaur let out a bone-chilling roar and charged right at him. Yi steeled himself, summoning a barrier to block the hit. The follow-up attack came in like a freight train. This was his first taste of C-class mayhem. It melted his barrier like it was made of warm butter. Chin noticed he was looking a bit charred. The Minotaur raised its axe high. Ye grabbed Chin's hand and yanked her away just in the nick of time. She gasped as the axe missed her face by inches, but soon realized it was stuck unable to move thanks to shadow ropes. She turned to Ye and asked if he was also a control type. He replied that he couldn't hold it for too long. But then, she quickly figured out it was in a bind stuck tight by these pesky shadow ropes. She turned to Ye and asked if he was also the type who liked to be in control. He shot back that he couldn't keep it locked down for too long, so she'd better skedaddle. He told her to make a break for it as soon as she hit the maze. She was confused why he wasn't tagging along for the ride. He cleared it up by saying he had to buy her some time to make her escape. She felt a twinge of worry for him. He instructed her to hide like a champ and promised he'd track her down soon. Not that he was losing sleep over her. To him, she was just a shiny $1,000,000 project. Ludin, now sporting the lava Minotaur look, was on a mission to find him. Out of nowhere, Ye popped up behind him. He inquired about the whereabouts of Chin. Then he took a swing at him with his axe. Ye cheekily suggested he take a wild guess and encouraged her to haul it. He urged her to dash as far as she could the moment she stepped into the maze. She was perplexed as to why he wasn't joining in on the fun. He explained he had to buy her some time to do a runner. She was still worried about him. He reminded her to hide like a pro and he'd be there soon to scoop her up. Not that he had any mushy feelings. To him, she was merely a $1,000,000 jackpot. Ludin, who had taken on the guise of the lava Minotaur, was hot on the hunt for him. Ye suddenly appeared behind him, demanding to know where Chin was. Then he swung his axe like a lumberjack. Ye playfully suggested he take a wild guess. He was completely flabbergasted to discover Ye creeping up like a ninja and giving his leg a good whack. But Ye was just as confused because even the cracks in the rock were tougher than his shot at winning. Ludin couldn't help but crack up at his own brain-dead move. Using a knife on stone is like showing up to a soup fight with a straw. Then he swung back with a punch like he had just won the lottery. Ye was battling an ocean of lava around him and figured it was the perfect time to play hide and seek in this big ol' open space. He took off like a cheetah with Ludin hot on his tail. As Ludin charged forward, he threw out some slick taunts, asking if running was the key part of Ye's master plan. Ye activated his shadow eye, convinced that even the invincible have a weak spot. Ludin was dead set on taking Ye out first before going hunting for Chin. He hollered for Ye to bite the dust, but Ye spotted Luden's chink in the armor and locked onto it, pouring all his energy into the target. Luden grinned like a Cheshire cat, saying he knew exactly what Ye had in mind. He smugly added that Ye's little tricks were about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. Ye felt like a tiny mouse compared to Luden's outrageous power, questioning how this dude was only C rank. With nowhere to run, Luden barreling towards him like a freight train. Ye stood there like a cat waiting for that perfect moment to strike. Luden chuckled, pointing out that Ye had finally run out of steam. He then found it downright hilarious that Ye was trying to take him down once again with those little daggers. Seriously. He bellowed that those cheap metal gizmos could only give him a tickle. Ye was just itching for Luden to make his move so he could aim for that weak point once more. It was right in the middle of Luden's back, but to Ye's surprise, it shone like 1,000 suns. Ye was taken aback. That fiery spot was so scorching hot that even his shadow energy struggled to combat the heat. Ye muttered that Luden was smarter than he'd initially thought, realizing he could guard his weak spot. Luden had no clue how Ye had figured it out, but he confirmed it was his soft underbelly. He was all too eager to brag, knowing that just knowing wouldn't help Ye since that spot was cooking at over 2,000 degrees Celsius. He even tossed out a deal. If Ye blabbed about Chin's whereabouts, he'd let him walk away with his life. Ye shot back, saying he wouldn't trust a backstabbing traitor. Luden was seriously ticked off, yelling, "You're just asking for an early grave," while charging at Ye with his axe. He dared Ye to stop dodging and show a bit of guts. Ye transformed his shadow into a wicked chain blade. Luden chuckled, ribbing him for still trying to dodge. Seizing his chance, Ye morphed the shadow into a rope. He aimed for that weak spot again. His shadow got super close, but melted like ice cream on a hot summer day. His patience was wearing thinner than a pancake. Meanwhile, Luden cackled at Ye's seemingly hopeless struggle, telling him to wave the white flag. Ye realized he was burning through his shadow energy faster than a match at a bonfire. Not ideal like a bad taco, it made him think about calling Chinchin for backup, but he quickly scrapped that idea. He was determined that even if it cost him his life, he wouldn't let Luden take control of his body. Plus, he figured taking down this C rank would score him a boatload of experience points. This was one golden opportunity he refused to let slip away. He aimed for Luden's blind spot yet again, confident that this time he'd break through. Despite the fiery burns, he poured every ounce of energy into it. The dagger tip brushed against that blazing spot. Luden screamed like a banshee, realizing his HP was running low, triggering a berserk rage. Suddenly, his attacks became faster and stronger like a turbocharged car. Ye was scratching his head, wondering why Luden had gone berserk out of the blue. He was blasted away like a rag doll and crashed against the wall with a bone-shaking thud. Luden didn't expect a lowly miner to push him this far. Ye could feel the heat from Luden's strikes as he decided it was time to end this circus. Out of nowhere, something clicked in him. He couldn't understand why his shadow energy was escalating beyond belief. Ching chimed in, saying the energy had always been there. It just needed a little fire to unleash it. He told Ye he hit the jackpot, unlocking a new level of shadow energy. Ye noticed that his shadow energy wasn't just healing his wounds. It was much more than that. Ching informed him it was a full-scale healing machine. Luden noticed this transformation, realizing Ye's aura had grown ominous. He couldn't allow Ye to bounce back any further. Ye stepped back to dodge Luden's swings. Luden couldn't believe Ye was keeping up with his lightning-fast triple speed boost. It made him question if Ye was really just E-rank. He decided to flood the arena with lava, hoping to leave Ye with nowhere to run. As lava flowed everywhere, Ye just stood there unfazed. Luden was sure the lava would turn him into a crisp, but to his utter shock, Ye marched through the lava like it was a day at the beach. He was using shadow enhancement. The basic form was already a powerhouse, leaving him wondering what top tier would feel like. He mocked Luden, calling him Boiler Boy, claiming the heat was way too mild. Luden couldn't wrap his head around it. Ye pointed out how Luden was enjoying himself until now, but now it was his turn to take control. Ye lunged forward again, moving like lightning, thanks to shadow enhancement amplifying his defense strength and speed by 200%. Luden was in disbelief when he saw his hand disappear. He spat curses at Ye, determined to grab him, but his hand crumbled to dust with a single swing of Ye's daggers. He quickly fashioned a replacement hand out of lava, confidently stating that as long as there's lava, he could regenerate forever, and that Ye's attacks were utterly pointless. Hearing that made Ye's eyebrow twitch, and he replied that he doubted Ludin could keep that up, especially since he looked like he was beginning to run on empty. Ludin dared him to strike again to prove it. Yes sliced at Ludin's limbs, challenging him to regenerate over and over. He kept going, and to Ludin's astonishment, he wasn't able to revert to his original form. Ludin urged him to swing once more. Yes sliced off some limbs and dared him to keep it up. He went all out. Surprisingly, he discovered he couldn't regenerate back to whole. He was scratching his noggin trying to figure out how in the world this was going down. Ludin chimed in, revealing that his energy tank was officially running on fumes. He practically begged him to throw in the towel. Ludin responded saying they didn't have anything personal against each other, so why on earth would they throw down until one of them bit the dust? He got that logic but stubbornly argued that he was on Chin's payroll to keep her safe. Ludin shot back that cash flow wasn't an issue because if he handed over Chin and they made it back to the city, he'd be rolling in more dough than she would. We're talking $5 million bucks. You couldn't shake the nagging feeling that a knife was just itching to find its way into his back. There was a solid chance Ludin would rally the boys for revenge, and that would be curtains for him. He snapped back that'd never happen. He thought Ludin was a complete backstabbing turkey. That little jab's giving him a bright idea to turn this traitor over to Qin Xiaoyang. She'd definitely cough up way more cash to settle the score with whoever harmed her daughter, and by rescuing her kid and catching a traitor, he'd have the head honcho of Dragon Gate 3 streets in his pocket. That was worth a whole lot more than $5 million bucks. Ludin realized he'd be transformed into a human pincushion in Shi Xiaoyang's hands, and there was no if that was the case, he'd whip out a crystal. Qian was taken aback by his possession of a piece of the prison gate. He warned Ye that if that fragment was shattered, the beast realm would lose its only shot at the outside world. The portal would vanish faster than a rabbit in a magic show, and they'd be stuck there for eternity. A beam of light shot through Ludin's hand. It was Yi. He snatched the fragment and stabbed at the weak point, causing Ludin to scream like a banshee. His body got ripped up all over, and he went down like a wet noodle. After that, the core zoomed into Ye, supercharging his abilities. Shadow Sense 2 leveled up to the ultimate Shadow Sense. Then came a shake. Qing Qin let him know that without the lava and Minotaur's juice to keep it steady, the beast realm was about to crumble. At the Beast Abyss exit, they finally made their escape. The other players, Qin told Ye that she had no idea he was that strong way off the E-rank charts. She invited him to join Dragon Gate 3 Street, convinced her dad would treat a powerhouse like him like royalty. Ye casually slid in that he wasn't too keen on joining any crew and asked her to keep his superpowers on the down low. She didn't press it, and instead some expert appraisal and assured him that no matter its worth, he'd get every last cent. He was cool with that. He could tell she had a keen eye when it came to weapons. If she knew her stuff, he just landed himself a buyer for all his gear. He'd be just fine even if she turned out to be a cheapskate like Boss Wang. He was still walking away with $1 million in his pocket. Once he got home, he scrutinized the prison gate fragment. Curiosity was gnawing at him. Qing piped up that with enough fragments, he could boost his strength up to S rank or even higher. That rank sounded like music to his ears. With the prison gate fragments popping up again, Xian started wondering if those scoundrels were still out there. He realized he needed to hustle up his recovery, and that kid was his ticket. He figured someday the kid would face things that would fry anyone's brain. He mulled over whether it was time to raise the alarm. Eventually, he decided it was too early and would just freak the kid out. He opted to let him bulk up first. At the NG Group E-Class Wraith Zone, things were locked down, tighter than a drum due to the mining mess. Ye stood at the cliff's edge, scanning the scene. He spotted 1 B-Class and 3 C-Class guards. He could hardly believe they had sent out that many. He figured with his current prowess, there was no way he could dig up the truth just yet. Qing Tian asked what was so worthy of investigation in a lowly E-Class dimensional rift. He replied that the truth about his parents' deaths was buried there. In the past, he got a check for $200,000 as a parting gift from the NG Group. They really pushed it. The arrogant guy grilled him on whether the cash wasn't enough. He shot back that he was after the truth, not the money. The man insisted it was just an accident that his parents and the other miners were gone. But Ye shook his head, not buying it, because his parents were C-Class awakened. He wanted to check it out, holding on to hope that they were still kicking. A big burly dude grabbed him and warned him that anything could happen in a Wraith Zone. Even C-Class fighters could bite the dust. Ye pointed out that it was just an E-Class Wraith Zone, so there shouldn't be anything scarier than E-Class hanging around. The man tightened his grip on Ye's collar and told him to chill out. Ye argued that even if his parents were in a tough spot, they could still escape alive. The man got mad, thinking he was just trying to score extra cash. Just as he was about to swing, someone shouted, "Stop!" It was Ning Dong Hao, the chairman of NG Group in A-Class, awakened. Chairman Ning laid into his lackeys because he had earlier ordered them to treat the families of victims with respect. He handed Ye more cash to help him through his troubles. Ye protested that he didn't want the money. He was after the truth. Chairman Ning promised they would investigate fully and give him a proper explanation. As the prison gate fragments resurfaced, it made Qian question if those rascals were still lurking around. He realized it was high time to speed up his recovery, and that kid was his ticket. He envisioned the day that kid would face things beyond human comprehension. He contemplated if now was the right time to drop some warnings. Ultimately, he decided it was too soon and might just give the kid a scare. He figured it would be better to let him strengthen up first. At the NG Group E-Class Wraith Zone, the area was on tight lockdown due to the mining mess. Yes, precipice eyeing the scene below. He noted that there was 1 B-Class and 3 C-Class guards. He was blown away that they'd dispatched that many heavy hitters just to keep an eye on the place. As he thought, he realized with his current strength, there was no way he could uncover the truth right now. Qing Tian wondered what could be so interesting in a lowly E-Class dimensional rift. He retorted that the truth surrounding his parents' death and its mystery lay buried within. Back in the day, he got 200,000 as a consolation prize from the NG Group. They practically twisted his arm into accepting the cash and signing a form stating his parents' deaths were an accident. When he hesitated, the arrogant guy pressed him on whether that wasn't enough cash. Ye boldly proclaimed that he was after the truth. The man insisted it was an accident and that his parents and the other miners simply passed away. Yet Ye refused to believe it because both his parents were C-Class awakened. He was desperate to storm in and check holding that his folks kicked the bucket by mistake. When he didn't budge, the smug dude asked if that wasn't satisfying enough for him. He shot back, declaring he wanted the full truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The guy kept insisting it was just an accident. His folks and the other miners kicked the bucket, but Ye wouldn't buy it. Both of his parents were elite C-Class awakened folks. Clutching onto hope and a sprinkle of desperation, he was itching to sneak in and check, praying they were still breathing somehow. A giant of a man grabbed him, warning that anything could happen in a Wraith Zone. Even C-Class fighters could take a dirt nap there. He shot back, but it's just an E-Class Wraith Zone. The Wraiths there shouldn't even pack more punch than E-Class. The guy yanked him by the collar and told him to smarten up. Ye retorted that even if his parents were in a bind, they'd always manage to walk away in one piece. The guy seethed, thinking Ye was just trying to squeeze more dough out of him. Just when he was about to throw a punch, someone suddenly shouted, "Knock it off." It was Ning Dong Hao, the big cheese at NG Group and A-Class Awakener. Chairman Ning let his crew have it for not properly comforting the victim's family, like he ordered. He tossed Yi some extra cash to help him navigate his current pickle. Yi insisted he didn't want the cash. All he craved was the cold, hard truth. He promised to dig deep and give him the straight dope on the situation. They bought into his story, thinking the truth would spring out like a jack-in-the-box, but instead, they painted his folks as thieves and slapped him with a $1 million bill. Chingan jumped in saying, regardless of your skin color, the weak always get stomped on. He told him to gather more Riftgate bits. When he's jacked enough, figuring out the truth will be easier than calling for a pizza delivery. Yi stayed quiet as a mouse, but Chintian picked up on his mental chatter. He blamed Chingan's shadow vibes for being as unpredictable as a cat on a hot roof, which is why he was stuck at E-Class. He wondered out loud how this guy plans to take over his body, while also helping him level up. Is he a hero? A villain? King Tian jumped in telling him to chill, and said if he couldn't see any potential in Yi, he wouldn't even waste a second on him. Yi replied, "Hey, I didn't say a word, but I'm getting pretty ticked off." This made him think Tian was a total weirdo even more. Just then, a mission invite dropped into his lap like a hot potato. At Chemical Zone, a D-Class ghost hangout, some dude in a suit asked Yi what took him so long. Yi mumbled something about it being far, but honestly, he rushed over from another E-Class Wraith Zone. An old man suddenly remembered him. He He greeted a guy named Uncle Hao who was all grins. It had been 5 long years since Yi's parents' accident. The other guys shrugged and said they thought they were waiting for someone important, but ended up with a deadbeat monster instead. Those guys, Guer, Gusan, and Guda, were mercs in C-Class awakened. The suit guy explained they were just there to mine and didn't want to trouble anyone more skilled. Guer hollered, telling him to stop lollygagging and spill the beans already. The suit guy clarified they were in a D-Class haunt, and their mission was to dig up 60 kilograms of ice crystal ore samples. Meanwhile, Yi noticed the fancy C-Class awakeners arriving in a D-Class zone. Talk about overkill. There was even a robed guy named Heizi, another C-Class merc. With the shifty vibes radiating from them, Yi read the room and figured none had a heart of gold. Plus, he could faintly sense another C-Class presence lurking like bad cologne. A guy sat by the rift entrance, eyes glued to his phone, grumbling about how all his toys had finally gathered. It was showtime for him. This harmless-looking dude was actually Blood Leopard, the right-hand man of the Black. As they entered the rift, Hao asked Yi if he didn't think he needed a protective suit. Yi shrugged it off, saying he was awake now and ready to take on whatever came. San teased him about being an exalted miner, a rare breed, and joked he should watch his tongue since Yi was the king of junk piles. Hao leaned in and told Yi to ignore their nonsense. Yi assured him he wasn't that reckless. Scanning the area, Yi noticed the plants looked set up for stealth, and he felt an ominous killing intent lingering nearby. Something flitted in front of him. In his mind, the hidden stalker was getting fidgety. Would it stick to the shadows or whip up some other plan? San yelled for Yi to move. Hao chimed in that they needed to pick up the pace. Yi sensed it was the perfect time to play with his surroundings and throw them off while keeping under the radar. He grabbed Uncle Hao and told him to hold on tight. Doc grumbled about the miner being too fast. They all yelled for him to stop. Yi assured them that it was fine since those 2 clowns were just trash, and if they ditched them, they'd be set for the grave. The red-haired guy perched on a branch watching those gooey brothers wondered if anyone else was catching on to the lurking danger. He ran his tongue along his lips, thinking life would be way too easy if everyone were as clueless as those 3. Da sensed something was amiss with the mission. Ever since they stepped in, it felt like a pair of eyes were glued to them. He told the others to chill out. It was just a D-Class quest, and with all 3 of them being C-Class, they could hold their own. San chimed in, feeling the same eerie sensation creeping up his spine. He suggested heading back. Just as Da tried to ease him, their eyes went wide in shock. S got ambushed from behind red strings slithering around his head. He recognized Blood Leopard and shouted to let him go so they could talk. Blood Leopard fired back that they'd poked the Black Leopard gang one too many times and there'd be no chit-chat. With that, he yanked on the string, slicing Sans in 2 right in front of the others. Da felt his anger boiling over as he charged ahead trying to stop him. Too late, red string snagged his fist and wrapped around his whole body, slicing through like butter. Da panicked and sprinted for his life, while Blood Leopard reveled in the chaos, enjoying the fear in his prey's eyes. Meanwhile, Ye took a breather with Ha. Hao asked why he ditched the other awakened folks. Yi asked if he'd upset anyone or any faction recently. Hawal insisted he was just a miner and couldn't have annoyed anyone. Yi dropped a bombshell revealing that the mission was a death trap and someone wanted all of them 6 feet under in that twisted realm. Hao looked scared to death. Yi told him if he knew something, he better spill it. Just then, Ye sensed it was prime time to use the surroundings to slip away unnoticed and spy from a safe distance. He grabbed Uncle Hao, urging him to hold on for dear life. Doc grumbled, saying the kid was too quick, yelling for him to stop. He assured them that it was all good, since those 2 were worthless trash, and if they left them behind, they'd be as good as gone. The red-haired guy lounged on a high branch, eyeing those goofball brothers. He pondered whether the others would catch on to the lurking danger. He licked his lips and thought that if everyone was as clueless as those 3, this whole game would be a snooze fest. Da mentioned he could feel something was off about the mission. Ever since they arrived, it felt like someone was spying on them. He told them not to get all jumpy, insisting that it was just a D-rank gig and they were all C-ranks, so they had it in the bag. San chimed in saying he felt funky too, like ice water was trickling down his spine. He suggested they head back. He was trying to soothe him when suddenly their eyes went wide. S got ambushed from behind, red strings tightening around his head. He recognized Blood Leopard and told him to let him go and they could sort it out. Blood Leopard shot back that they had been poking the Black Leopard gang non-stop, so there was nothing to talk about. He yanked the strings tight, and they cleaved through San's body. The duo watched in horror. Da was livid and charged ahead, but tried to stop him. The red string snagged his fist, and before he knew it, his entire body was bound by them. The string sliced through his skin, and in a panic, he bolted as fast as he could, while Blood Leopard went into a frenzy because he loved seeing his prey freak out. Meanwhile, Ye and Ha took a quick break. Hao asked why he ditched those other awakened guys. Ye wondered if he'd stepped on anyone's toes or any faction lately. Hawal insisted he was just a kid. No way he could ruffle anyone's feathers. "Why do you ask?" he questioned. Our main character spilled the beans that the mission was a death trap and someone wanted them all 6 feet under in that twisted place. Hao panicked, admitting he was scared. Ye told him if he knew something, he should spill it. All of a sudden, a guy popped up out of nowhere and chewed Ye out for being all quiet when things were clearly going sideways. He blamed Ye for his brother's unfortunate ends. Ye shot back that at least he helped flush out the big bad before he bit the dust himself. That little jab sent him straight into a tantrum. He wanted to know what Ye meant, and Ye just repeated that he was about to kick the bucket. He was totally shocked to find himself caught up in a web of red strings. Blood Leopard eyed Ye and couldn't believe how interesting the kid was. Ye kicked it up a notch with his ultimate shadow eye. You should have seen Blood Leopard's face. He was like a deer caught in headlights. Ye begged for mercy, claiming they were just kids who'd never crossed paths before. But Blood Leopard wasn't going to cut him any slack, because during a wild night of drinking not too long ago, Blood Leopard viewed them as just a couple of minors who'd never crossed swords with him before. But he wouldn't let Ye go because after a night of too many brews, Ye had let slip he was the top dog. Blood Leopard was an expert at finding human weak spots. He ranked as a C rank and had a blood spider silk ability that cut through high-frequency vibrations within a 10-meter radius. Hawal swore on his life he'd take that secret to his grave and wouldn't breathe a word to anyone. But Blood Leopard only had faith in one truth. Ye warned how to watch his back. But Ye's warning was like throwing a lifesaver to a sinking ship. Hao caught a bullet in the shoulder. Blood Leopard declared that only the dead could really keep secrets. Ye cursed him out, then stood his ground. His blades met Blood Leopard's claws, and Blood Leopard was surprised that a kid like him could pack such a punch. Now, it all made sense that he took down that punk Joe Ting. But Blood Leopard shot back that Ye could only go so far. He just barely dodged getting clawed, but luck was on his side as he jumped away from the attack. Blood Leopard was more than eager to help him meet his maker if he was so inclined. At that moment, Ye cranked up his shadow enhancement. He tried to defend against the swarm of attacks, but he was really struggling. Blood Leopard noticed he was still distracted, so he lined up for a claw strike, sending Ye crashing into a tree. Hao tried to inch closer to Ye, but Ye yelled at him to stay back. Getting too close was a definite no against Blood Leopard, so he needed a new game plan. Blood Leopard smugly reassured them both they were headed for the grave. Ye retorted that he wasn't sure who would end up being the first to kick the bucket. He activated the ultimate shadow eye and pulled out a shadow morph dagger, but every move he made got countered. Blood Leopard jabbed at him, asking if that was really all he had to show for himself. But Ye had a few tricks up his sleeve. Blood Leopard chuckled, amazed how many cards this kid had for a rookie, but sadly, he was still just an E rank. Out of the blue, Gusan slithered up from the ground and wrapped his snake-like body around Blood Leopard. Blood Leopard was betting on him staying still until things cooled, but too bad for him. His own skills turned out to be his biggest weakness. Close combat. That was Blood Leopard's turf. Red strings twisted around Goo's head and neck, and poof, he turned into confetti. Ye stood slack-jawed to see even a C rank go down so easily. He was definitely weaker than Blood Leopard, so it was time to play stealthy ninja and make a getaway with Hao. But Blood Leopard had other ideas escape not on his watch. As night fell, things were only getting hotter. Ye decided to patch Hao's wound first. He swore he'd come up with a plan for their escape, but Hao grumbled he'd only be dead weight. Ye couldn't resist probing for more info on why Blood Leopard had it out for him. Hao accidentally spilled the beans that it all circled back to the grim truth about his parents' deaths. Ye's face went serious like he just sucked on a lemon. He pressed for more details. Hao yelled back that he was unclear at first, but now, with Blood Leopard on a killing spree, it was clear Kui Shi Hao was sneakier than a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He revealed that before the mining mishap, his dad had a sixth sense about Kui Shi Hao playing around with some dicey experiments underground. Nobody expected the big boom just days later, and shockingly, his parents got blamed for stealing ore. Ye grilled him on why he'd kept mum back then. The truth fear stole more than just secrets. After all, he was just a kid. Losing his job wasn't an option, especially with a family depending on him. Ye felt like someone just popped his balloon, disappointed that Hao had only been a bystander while his parents got such a raw deal. The guilt was like a 300-pound gorilla sitting on his back, leading him toward the bottle and spilling everything to the wrong ear. Suddenly, Blood Leopard strode in like he owned the joint, ready to stir up chaos. Ye's instincts kicked in. He spotted Hao all bound up in Blood Leopard's strings like a badly wrapped present. With no time to waste, Hao threw out an apology, wishing Ye wouldn't hold any grudges. After that, blood started spraying everywhere like a poorly scripted horror movie. Blood Leopard experienced a deja vu moment. Ye looked just like the kid of those 2 C ranks he had a grudge against. He charged at Ye, ready to send him off to meet his folks. But Ye wasn't about to go out like a loser. He swung back only to find himself totally blindsided. Blood Leopard cackled, suggesting that watching his own kiddo parts splatter would be a real roller coaster. Ye shot back that his blood spider silk wasn't the be-all end-all of nature. He summoned his shadow morph to whip up a giant sword, figuring out that the moment Blood Leopard struck was when he had his guard down. With a mighty swing, he broke free from the strings, leaving Blood Leopard looking like he'd just seen a ghost. So Blood Leopard decided to whip up more strings to throw at him. Realizing this kid was willing to trade pain for pain made Blood Leopard raise an eyebrow. But Ye crumbled to the ground. He was hitting his wall. Blood Leopard called his bluff, and despite nearly losing his lunch earlier, let out a chuckle. He flung his strings again, taunting Ye, and claiming if he wasn't an E rank, he'd have been toast a long time ago. He spotted Ye's fiery glare and found it downright hilarious. Some strings latched onto him again, reminding him that if he weren't an E rank, he'd have been history. He dared Ye to take a shot, enjoying Ye's fierce glare that sent him into a fit of laughter. Every time he noticed those ants acting all skittish, it just made his day a whole lot brighter. To spice things up, he decided to spill some tea. He admitted Wu was partly right, but it wasn't a mining accident that did away with his parents. It was all on him. He soaked in the expressions of horror on the kids' faces. He casually pointed out that when he booted his mom out of the picture, his dad wore the same look too. His father reluctantly stood by as Blood Leopard turned his mother into mincemeat. Blood Leopard felt the threads he was using getting burnt, and he was completely baffled about how. Just then, Ye unleashed a burst of energy that made him shine brighter than a Christmas tree. Ching Tian popped up behind him, gritting his teeth and promising Blood Leopard a one-way trip to oblivion. Just like he guessed, Ye found a way to channel his hatred into boosting that shadow energy. Once the energy kicked in, something clicked. When the dust cleared, his C-rank shadow enhancement shot up to level 2. He also stumbled upon a shiny new skill called Shadow Jaunt. He could slip into any shadow and pop out somewhere else. Blood Leopard was dumbfounded to discover his injuries healed. Little did he realize he'd been sitting on healing powers, but that didn't freak him out. In fact, he found it way more hilarious when a poor soul was gasping for breath at death's door. Yi rolled his eyes and let him in on a little secret. Beneath those shadows, he was the real hunted one. Blood Leopard blinked in confusion as the kid suddenly powered up. Just like that, Ye zipped right behind him. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to send him packing. Ye unleashed a flurry of flying daggers, but honestly, that was like tossing toothpicks at a bulldozer. Not done yet, Ye unleashed his Shadow J, a teleport skill, combined with some snazzy thrown weaponry. Blood Leopard was momentarily baffled, but it was still child's play. Those puny knives wouldn't pierce his fortress. Ye was on the move again. He casually mentioned he wasn't trying to break through his defenses. He knew Blood Leopard couldn't do both attacking and defending at the same time. That was his Achilles heel. Ye zipped around him, slashing like a madman, causing Blood Leopard to spit out a crimson waterfall. The irony hit him hard. He was losing to a kid. Ye bombarded him with questions about the mining incident. Just as Blood Leopard was about to let the cat out of the bag about his dear mother, Ye whipped out his dagger and took off his arm. Blood Leopard yelled like he was auditioning for a horror movie. Ye's patience, let's just say, it was thinner than a pair of cheap pantyhose. Blood Leopard mocked him about what he would do if he told the truth, meticulously laying the blame on Qishihao. He claimed Yi's father stumbled into an experiment, and to keep it hush-hush, they set up a mining accident for the rental parents. That bombshell cranked Ye's rage meter up to 11. Once he found out Qishihao was in on this mess, he expected Ye to be quaking in his sneakers. But before he could finish his little speech, Yi had already sent him into the great beyond, hell-bent on serving justice for every rat involved. It started to rain that night as Yi rolled up to the NG Group headquarters. He spotted Shihao gearing up to escape in a car. Qinggan, knowing Yi's reckless tendencies, reminded him not to go throwing himself into a lion's den just because he hit C rank and should sense that an A rank was lurking nearby. It hit him like a ton of bricks that both the big cheese of the NG Group and the A-rank powerhouse Ning Dong Hao were snug inside that vehicle, so he decided to shadow their ride while assuring Qing Tian he wouldn't do anything too crazy. Besides, he wasn't completely sold on Blood Leopard's sob story. His real mission figure out if Shi Hao was solely responsible for getting the parents on a one-way trip, or if the NG Group was in on it too. He didn't give a hoot if Ning Dong Hao was involved. To him, a blood debt was settled with blood. Arriving at the Black Panther gang's hideout made Yi wonder just what Shi Hao was up to in the dead of night. A guy in a black trench coat was barking orders to his minions to handle the experimental toys with kid gloves. Shi Hao asked him about the fate of the old miner Ha Wu. He replied that Blood Leopard had gone missing, and the otherworldly gate he used to sneak in disappeared like a magic trick. But honestly, it didn't matter if they could confirm the old man's demise or not. Shi Hao was scratching his head trying to figure out what went wrong when Blood Leopard was still just a C rank. The guy in the trench coat suspected he underestimated Blood Leopard. Among the bodies he left behind were 4 advanced C ranks. Shi Hao urgently commanded for the equipment to be moved ASAP to avoid any hiccups. The experiment was in serious trouble, and no screw-ups were allowed. The mysterious man asked if the finances were sorted. Shi Hao assured him, saying money wasn't an issue. Yi was all ears keeping up with his eavesdropping. He pieced it all together. Shi Hao was the puppet master behind this entire fiasco, but just then, the guy in the trench coat caught a whiff of him. He ignited a crate while demanding to know who was lurking. In a flash, Ye vanished like he was in an Olympic sprint. Shi Hao was baffled by what just happened. He couldn't tell if it was a figment of his imagination or the pesky aura of impending doom. Ye was sweating bullets. He almost got caught. Quickly ducking behind another crate, he contemplated how Kank was just not cutting it. The following day, at the Qin Group, Yi found himself at Qin Xiao Shang's place, president of Long Men 3rd Street. Standing outside the building, Ye looked like he was up to no good. Qing Tian, knowing he wasn't out there hunting for new gigs at the crack of dawn, asked what he was up to. Ye informed him he was on a mission to hunt down the 3rd fragment and figure out how much his weapon could earn him. Just then, a woman approached and offered her assistance. So he casually asked what Ye was doing there. Ye was on the hunt for the 3rd fragment and checking out how much his weapon was worth. A lady walked up offering help, and he sure was in need of it. He made it clear he was on the lookout for Qin. She inquired if he had an appointment or if he just strolled in like he owned the joint. A woman hanging off a dude sporting green hair shot him a look like he was rocking socks with sandals. She pretty much told him this posh place was no hangout for a broke minder. Can you believe he actually had the guts to say the eldest Mrs. Qin's name right to her face? Ye spotted Suqing and thought, oh boy, this is going to be entertaining. The woman kept throwing insults at him like he was a piñata at a birthday bash, while Suqing watched with amusement. Su wondered why nobody had tossed him out like last week's milk. So Ye stepped in, asking if that was the kind of hospitality they offered at Long Men 3rd Street. Su shot back that a guy like him didn't even make the cut for a guest. Ouch! Then she landed the ultimate zinger, saying he wasn't even qualified to be the Qin family's footrest. Ye pondered if all the Qins were this stuck-up arrogant and bloated with self-importance. His dreams of hitting up Shineen were dwindling fast, so he contemplated making a run. He pulled off a shadow jaunt like a magician at a kid's birthday party, and in an instant those goons were out like a light. Next thing you know, he's got Su by the chin, her jaw probably rattling like an old toy car. The woman freaked, screaming at him to let go of the precious young Master Qin. Otherwise, the Chin family was going to roll out the red carpet of revenge. He launched Sue right at the woman, and they both went down like two clumsy actors in a rom-com. Ye released them for saying's sake. But Sue, he was ready to unleash the Hulk, itching to settle the score right there and then. Ye turned to face him. As the tension rose like dough in a warm oven, someone jumped between them, like a boxing referee yelling for them to cut it out. A silver-haired lady swooped in, letting Ye know he had some nerve, stirring up trouble in the Chin camp. Sue screeched something about how Ye was toast for shaking things up in the Chin group. Talk about family drama. The silver-haired lady demanded they kick him out. Sue whined that she was going too easy on him. He suggested they should break his arms and legs instead, but surprise, surprise, Sue found himself getting grabbed instead. He asked his cousin what she was doing, acting all high and mighty. The woman jumped in, explaining that the poor minder had the nerve to call her by name, and young Master Chin was just blowing off some steam for her sake. She told them to show the haughty security guards and junior employees the door never to return. The woman reminded young Master Chin with a cheeky smirk that she was his girlfriend and expected him to have her back after she put everything on the line for him. Sien also threw down a warning at Sue about how to address her. If he ever dared to flaunt the Chin family name again, she'd show no mercy. After that little showdown, Sien turned to Ye, inviting him to chill for a bit. She even apologized for the chaos caused by a junior member of the family. He brushed it off, saying every family has its share of troublemakers. Just as she was about to lead him into a room, a staff member barged in, saying the president wanted a word. She told him to hold his horses, that she'd be right back. He shrugged, saying it wasn't a big deal. She curiously asked if it was urgent, but the president didn't spill any details, just that she needed to come immediately. Once they dashed off, the exit was blocked and someone stepped out. An old distinguished gentleman questioned Ye about who he thought he was. He activated his ultimate shadow eye and discovered this guy was A rank. Not only did he have the eye of deterrence, instilling nightmares in anyone who crossed him, but also furious thunder, cranking up his lightning skills like he was prepping for the Olympics. Ye kept his guard up, realizing he was in the presence of a heavyweight player. He asked if there was a mix-up, since he was just a minor. Inside, he felt violated by that mental attack like it was a bad horror flick. Shadow enhancement, totally useless against this. Meanwhile, the guy found it hilarious that the eye of deterrence didn't intimidate him. He shot back that things weren't as simple as they appeared. He unleashed a lightning attack that would make anyone sweat bullets. Ye was impressed he managed to withstand that storm. He figured this guy had to be at least B-rank strength, yet he still claimed to be a minor. The old dude demanded to know why Ye was pretending to be someone he wasn't, just to cozy up to Sien. Before he could hurl more threats, someone bellowed his name, Qin Xiao Shang, with a flair for the dramatic. It was Sien. She pinched at his ear like a scolded child, berating him for dragging her away just to grill her buddy. Didn't he have better things to do? Seeing him getting manhandled, he told her to be gentle and let his dad save face. She snapped back that he better not bother her friend again. Ye, putting two and two together, realized this guy was Qin Xia Shang, the head honcho of Longman 3rd Street. Sien turned to him, apologizing for her dad's antics, explaining he always thought people were out to get her when they got too close. He said it made total sense. A dad worrying about someone being duped by a scoundrel was just classic. She was shocked at how well he understood her dad, but honestly, it wasn't rocket science. Her dad was just on the other side of the glass door, and it felt like his thoughts were playing out on a reality show. Sien was fed up with her dad's antics, yelling at him to scram. Once the dust settled, Sien handed Ye a card loaded with a $5 million deposit. She explained the fancy material for the great sword came with a special price post-appraisal. That was great news for him, but he admitted he was there for a different reason. He pulled out a fragment and asked where he could find more like it. She replied that this mysterious fragment from another dimension used to be easy to come by, but... He told her to tread lightly and let her dad save face. She retorted to get out and not to hassle her buddy anymore. Yi had a light bulb moment. The man was Qin Xia Shang, the big cheese of Longman 3rd Street. Sien apologized for her dad's overly protective antics. She explained that he always thinks people have hidden agendas when they get too close. He agreed, saying it was completely understandable and that her dad was just looking out for her from falling for a fraud. She raised an eyebrow, surprised he understood her dad so well. But honestly, it was hard not to. The guy was right outside the glass door, practically thinking out loud. Kian was exasperated with him yelling for him to scram. Once the storm settled, Sen handed Ye a card with a hefty 5 million deposit. She clarified that the material used in that great sword was special, and the client wanted to appraise it before tossing a price out there. No stress for him. He came clean that he had another agenda on his mind. Pulling out a fragment, he asked her where he could chase down something like that. She replied that this elusive fragment from another dimension used to be as common as dirt, but times had changed. He flashed her a piece and inquired about where he could score more like it. She explained that this oddball fragment from another dimension used to be a dime a dozen, but lately it's as rare as a unicorn at a birthday bash. Looks like someone went on a wild shopping spree, making those items super rare. She suggested he check out the auction over on Longman Men 3rd Street. After hearing that, someone was picking up all the tiny bits. Qing Tian had a hunch it was all linked to Jihao. The guard who spilled the beans earlier filled the president in on the scoop about Ye, noting he was just your average 20-year-old who had only been marked as an E-rank ascendant a few days ago. But since no special energy was picked up in his system, he was watching Ye leap from E-rank to C-rank in such a short time made him suspicious that the kid had been playing the hide your strength game all along. Just then his phone buzzed. He picked it up and jokingly asked old Huo what made him think of him. Huo wanted to know if he still had any of those awesome swords his daughter had sent over. He was a bit fuzzy on that, so he asked what was up. Huo insisted he find out if there were more, because they were looking to snag as many as they could. For a crafty old fox like him to be so eager, it made him think about what grand scheme. He couldn't reveal too much, but he did drop a hint that the sword's material could amp up their army's overall strength. With Yi's mysterious powers and identity combined with this extraordinary weapon in his hands, Xiang was completely baffled. Ye made his way to the auction as suggested, and as he stared at all the goods, he felt a surge of hope that he might actually find some fragments there. Ye tripped past a lady swooning over young Master Zhou. This was the same gal who had been with young Master Qin before. She claimed it was Zhou who wouldn't leave her alone and even quit her job just to escape him. The dude promised to take care of her, and she wrapped her arms around him all lovey-dovey. Little did she know, Zhou was way too busy checking out Ye. He couldn't help but wonder if Blood Leopard had finally decided to make a move. The woman spotted Yi and chirped about how a little nobody slipped in unnoticed. He reminded her that her memory seemed a bit hazy, asking if she'd forgotten how it felt when he gave her a taste of that slap a few days ago. Young Master Zhou warned him to steer clear, but then, bam, he bumped into someone. It turned out to be a dude in a black trench coat who called out Zhou Ting for being a disgrace to the Black Panther gang. Ting referred to him as Brother Bao. Bao sauntered past Ye, telling him that slapping one of his subordinates was like smacking the entire Black Panther gang. He slapped his hand on Ye's shoulder, squeezing it like a lemon, until Ye was down on his knees trying to apologize. Ye wasn't having any of that and stood his ground, cracking the ground underfoot. Apologizing, Bao couldn't believe how tough this kid was. Ting pointed out that Ye clearly didn't know his place for annoying Bao. Just then, Can showed up and reminded the Black Panther gang where they were, at Dragon Gate 3rd Street. They were welcome to spend some dough, but if they wanted to stir up trouble, they could join the chaos happily. Bao backed down, and they all headed toward the auction. Cien checked in on Li, asking if he was okay. Li replied that he was all good. Once they were away from the mayhem, Bao grilled Ting about the kid's background and how he landed on their bad side. Ting elaborated that he was the dude who swiped the prized sword meant for him and even bragged about wiping the Black Panther gang off the map. Bao's jaw dropped at this news. He yanked Ting by the collar to make sure he was serious. At that moment, Shi Hao showed up asking Bao what was the fuss. They both glanced at Yi, and Bao remarked that the kid was on Blood Leopard's radar, puzzled at how he was still around. It made him wonder if the kid had actually taken down Blood Leopard, but Ting thought that was a long shot since the kid was just trash. He couldn't fathom how he might measure up to the second in command. Yi spotted Shi Hao, who recognized him right away as the timid kid he once knew. This sparked his curiosity about how Yi got tangled up with Sane. Yi asked Sane about her presence there, and she explained it was because her dad suddenly wanted to see him. That sent a chill down his spine, worrying he might be back in targeting mode. But she quickly reassured him that with her by his side, her dad wouldn't dream of causing a scene. Shihao approached them, surprised to run into them. Ye shot back that he was just a minor character stuck in the mines, paying off debt like a good little worker bee. He casually strolled past, declaring he wouldn't mingle with high-powered NG group executives like him. Shihao replied that the bigwigs up top were in charge of his parents' case, wanting to help, but feeling Ye noticed how Shihao was dodging responsibility. He pointed out that Shihao knew deep down what the truth was. He warned them that truth always rears its head, and if they kept up their mischief, karma was coming for them. Bao hollered that this kid was asking for a lesson, but Shisha cut him off, reminding him they were in Xiao Zhang's territory, so starting a brawl was off the table. But since the kid knew a bit too much, they might need to send someone after him. Bao nodded and promised to get that arranged right away. Kene took Yi to meet her dad. As they entered the room, the host declared the auction was officially on. With the auction underway, Chene slipped away to chat with her dad, saying she'd let Yi know if anything juicy popped up. He thanked her for that and couldn't help but wonder what President Xiao Shang needed him for. Xiao Zhang got right down to business, asking if he had any more weapons like the one he had Chene sell last time. Given that Xiao specifically sought him out, it was clear he was itching for more from the Entropic clan. Ye pointed out that Kui Shihao was ducking responsibility like a champ. He told them, Hao had sent a message, truth always finds a way to bubble up, and if you pile up enough bad karma, retribution will come knocking at your door. Bao hollered that he needed a lesson, but Shisha jumped in. Shisha reminded him that they were in Xiao Shang's territory, so they needed to keep it cool. But since the kid knew things, he probably shouldn't. They'd need to send someone to handle it. Bao nodded and promised to get right on that. Seeing brought Ye to her dad. As they stepped into his lair, the host announced the auction's kickoff. Since it was showtime, Sang excused herself to catch up with her dad first, but promised to alert him if anything interesting came up. He expressed his gratitude, already curious about the president's summons. Xiao Shang wasted no time asking if he had any more weapons like the last one he got Sang to sell. Noticing Xiao's directness, Ye figured he was really clamoring for some Entropic clan firepower. More weapons like the one he ordered were becoming hard to come by lately. Noticing that Xiao had sought him out specifically, he could tell that he was dead set on snagging the Entropic clan's firepower. But he knew he had to keep it chill, because pulling out too much at once would ruin the vibe and mess with the price. He just casually dropped that he'd come across the weapon, and oh, by the way, he had 2 more tucked away like rabbits in a hat. Xiao Shang tossed him an extra 40 million, bringing the grand total to a jaw-dropping 45 million. He couldn't deny that 15 million per weapon was no small potatoes, but he also made it clear that for guys like them, those weapons were nothing less than magical lifesavers. Xiao Shang raised an eyebrow, wondering what the kid was up to. He wanted 25 million per weapon. Xiao Shang's jaw hit the floor. You could practically see the steam coming out of his ears. And the kid was rolling with a crew. Out of nowhere, Xian popped up to declare that the item had arrived. She hollered Xiao Shang's name as a heads up. With a sigh, he had no choice but to fork over the last 70 million all at once. Qian pointed out the treasure Yi was after. Meanwhile, Xiao Shang was internally replaying fantasies of giving the kid a good punch in the face. The host kicked off the bidding at 7 million, and like popcorn in a microwave, it quickly shot up to 10 million. Then, participant number 6 raised it to 15 million. Yi confirmed they indeed had the fragment, feeling pretty confident with over 70 million lounging in his account, thinking it would be more than enough to snag it. He slapped down 30 million. His strategy to scare off the competition. But man, throwing around 30 million felt like a bee sting to the wallet. The host called out to see if anyone was brave enough to bid higher than 30 million. Bao spotted Yi hanging around like a fly on a wall. He was baffled why the kid was after that item. 30 million was about to be the final bid until Shihao jumped in with 50 million. He threw down the gauntlet, questioning just how deep that kid's pockets really went. Then Yi replied with 60 million. Xiao Shang warned him that wasn't worth that kind of cheddar, urging him to back off before he burns through his fresh cash. Qian nodded, agreeing that Shihao was just messing around to jack up the price. Not too long ago, 10 million was already pushing it for that thing, but Yi was hell-bent on duking it out with Shihao for it. He found himself contemplating whether the Qin group or the NG group had fatter wallets. Xiao Shang confidently chimed in that the Qin group was definitely loaded, but he had no intentions of helping out. Shihao tossed down 70 million. Yi countered, claiming it was because he owned the sword and waved it like a trophy. Xiao Shang had snagged those two at an earlier price, and even with some spare change, he was still lagging behind in the bidding war. He told him it wasn't the president's problem and assured him he could manage to cough up the needed amount. Xiao Shang sensed he had a few more hidden away. The host called out for 70 million going once. Qian tugged her dad's ear and nagged him about being stingy over scraps. She promised to pay him back if Yi couldn't cough it up. The announcement blasted for 70 million going twice. Qian hurried Ye along so they could make a move before the old codger snatched it away. Somewhere deep inside, Ye was scratching his head, bewildered by the lavish life of the super rich. 100 million was like pocket change to them. He tossed down 100 million. Number 2, Shihao leaped to 200 million. He was determined to snag it since it was crucial for their project. Ye shot back with 300 million. They volleyed back and forth until it rocketed to 500 million. Spectators began to question if they'd lost their marbles arguing over a fragment. It sparked curiosity about its real value. One sharp observer speculated it was more like an ego clash than anything worthwhile. Bao grumbled that the kid was clearly playing against them. Shai countered that he wasn't ready for this yet. Then he tossed down 1 billion. The room fell silent as the host announced that number 2 bid 1 billion. Qian could see the bad guy was just poking at them. Ye realized Shihao wouldn't let impulse lead him to lose that much money. Xiao Shang advised him to take a moment and think it through. He asked if Yi could seriously come up with weapons worth that much. Qian jumped in saying she'd cover the cost. She urged him to bid fast. He cranked it up to 2 billion. Then he shot Shihao a cocky grin. Bao started wondering where the kid was pulling all that cash from. By this point, Shihao was ready to blow a gasket. He figured Xiao Shang had to be behind this. Otherwise, there was no way the kid could have 2 billion. The host called 2 billion for the third and final time. And finally congratulated participant 9 for snagging the mysterious fragment. Qian was over the moon for Ye. She asked if she really needed to be that hyped. She claimed there was nothing quite like watching bad guys take a hit. Xiao Shang cleared his throat and pointed out that while Yi enjoyed the thrill of the bid, even subtracting what he had already spent, he still had to come up with over 70 more. He questioned if he could really deliver that many weapons. He replied that things get precious when they're rare, and when you have too much of one thing, the price can't just be calculated the same way. He snapped his fingers, and to everyone's shock, revealed over 100 swords. That should square the 2 billion bill. Xiao Shang chuckled at how straightforward this kid was. He admired his strength and determination, imagining what it would be like to work for him. Qian caught Yi's eye and told him that if he pulled any fun stunts next time, he'd better give her a holler. Xiao Shang was not too thrilled about that. The kid was a wild card, and there was a chance he could whisk his precious daughter away. He invited her back to his place. Then he told Yi to swing by and grab the item he won. Ye expressed his thanks, but before the president strolled off, he dished out some parting wisdom. He cautioned him not to underestimate the NG crew. This isn't exactly a solo gig. Sometimes you've got to buddy up with someone on the same page, and if he's interested, he can totally reach out. Meanwhile, Bao was yapping away on the phone, filling Shihao in that the Qinru president took a little vacation with his daughter. And guess who's swooping in to grab the leftovers? You guessed it, the kid. Shihao shot back that they'd make their move once the dude clears out of the Longman 3rd Street zone, and this time they're making sure not to trip over their own shoelaces. Bao was strutting around like a peacock thanks to 3 C-rank talents in tow. He promised it'd be as secure as a bank vault. While they strolled down the peaceful street, Ye filled Qing Tian in on the latest scoop that Xiao Shan had been snooping like a nosy neighbor. He realized the last comment was a slick way to get him to team up, but as long as he wasn't tied down, teaming up for some backup sounded pretty savvy. Qing Tian jumped in, saying that Xiao Shang was just a bottom-tier A rank, and as long as Yi had enough fragments, he could easily flaunt his stuff as an S rank. Yi shot him a side-eye, which Qing Tian interpreted as a sign of skepticism. Yi cleared his throat, saying he totally believed him. He was just thinking about where to kick off the trial. But deep down, Qing Tian sensed he was still not buying it. So he made a big fuss about how S ranks weren't as easy to find as Chinese cabbage. There were only 9 S ranks in the whole world, and if Yi thought it was all sunshine and rainbows, he'd be ready to throw down if it meant testing Yi's skills, but he kept that under wraps. Suddenly, Ye's eyes widened as he spotted, but he kept everything locked up tighter than a drum. Suddenly, Ye's heart dropped. His apartment was on fire. Neighbors bolted out the door like extras in a disaster movie. Then his phone erupted with a ring cutting through his spiraling panic. Can warned him that the Black Panther gang was prepping to make a play for him. He replied they were already marching straight into trouble. She suggested he lay low while she sent in reinforcements, but he assured her he could handle it. Ting stormed in barking orders for him to get down and begged, promising maybe, just maybe, he'd let his pup off the hook. Ye could see they were underestimating him by sending just a few gang members. He warned them to brace for impact, but Ting snapped back that it was Ye who was going to drop. He wanted to see how an E rank could handle 3 real C ranks. They closed in on him. Yi piped up that even Blood Leopard couldn't take him out, which made those C ranks think maybe Ye was hiding some secret abilities. But Ting warned them not to fall for the act. The guy was just a kid. They figured he didn't have an ounce of fight in him. One of them lunged at him from behind, but poof, he disappeared and appeared right behind the guy, giving him a good whack on the back of the neck. He quipped, "Yep, totally just a kid." They were dumbfounded by how he pulled that off. Ting was now panicking and ordered the other 2 to charge him, but Ye skillfully knocked them out without breaking a sweat. Then he grabbed Ting by the throat and teased him about being scared of a miner. He grinned, reminding him how much he loved playing with fire. Ye tightened his grip, making Ting yell for him to let go. Since they were having such a good time with fire, he tossed Ting toward the blazing apartment. Ting warned him that President Koi and Brother Bao would be after him. He landed smack in the flames. Ye replied, "I'll be sending them your way real soon." Just then, Kian showed up with her bodyguard, asking if he was okay. He said he was all good, just sporting a few minor scrapes. She asked what his next move was. Since they threw the first punch, he had to swing back, and she was all in to help him out. He wondered why she was so ready to back him. She explained she'd been tired of the Black Panther gang for what felt like forever, and now they dared to mess with a friend, one of the few pals she actually had. She blushed, admitting he made her smile, which fired her up to take those Black Panther punks down. She invited him into her home, offering a place to crash until he found a nest of his own. Very few people stuck around there, so she told him to pick any room he wanted. He pointed to one, but she insisted it was off limits. She tried to stop him from going in, but he peeked inside and saw a room packed with all things girly stuffed animals galore. He told her it was just her style. She fretted about him, thinking it was childish for the boss lady of the Chin Corporation to dig that stuff. He brushed it off, saying it's totally normal for girls to enjoy those things. She shoved him out of the room. It made her blush when he remarked that it made her way cuter than her icy exterior. No one had ever tossed that compliment her way. Suddenly her stomach grumbled like a thunderstorm. Talk about embarrassing, he chuckled. She justified that if she wasn't worried, he would have been in hot water. She wasn't about to go hungry. He pulled out some snacks, handing them over food he stashed for emergencies. She was puzzled about where he found such goodies. Back at the auction, she also wondered where he pulled those weapons from. He simply joked that he knew a trick or 2. She perked up, asking if he could teach her. Suddenly, he sensed a vibe. He suggested she head home first. She asked what was up. Her dad was hiding behind some bushes, spilling his thoughts out loud. He figured that if she didn't head back soon, her dad would totally chew him up. She scolded her father, and once she vanished from view, he swiftly closed the curtains. The house was within Long Men 3rd Street's territory, so no one should be bothering them. Chinten appeared, bringing the fragments from the lava Minotaur, Blood Leopard, and the auction. He had always been eager to figure out the connection between those. Her dad would totally chew him up. She gave her father a solid talking to. Once she was out of sight, he pulled the curtains closed. The house was in the infamous Long Men 3rd Street, so no one should bug them. Chinten popped in with bits and pieces from the lava Minotaur, Blood Leopard, and some auction items. He had always been curious about how those things were connected. Fragments and those dimensional portals that pop up like mushrooms after a good rain. King Tian pointed out that the 3 fragments in front of him were just scratching the surface of the alternate prison's entrance. Turns out all the dimensional portals in their universe were linked to those fragments from the alternate prison door. As they stepped through the portal, Qing Tian looked like he was part of some secret club about these antics. Yi couldn't help but ask what this alternate dimension was all about. He was also wondering why a whole brigade of insect dudes and beastly bros was hanging around. Qing Tian laid it out. They were all prisoners. What he dubbed an alternate dimension or prison was really just a massive interdimensional jailhouse. Next thing they knew, they found themselves in a desert. The wind was howling like it had a personal vendetta, forcing him to shield his peepers from the flying sand. Then he laid it on Qing Tian about those prisoners. Qing Tian said he'd spill the beans once Yi kicked some serious butt in the trials. They reached this towering structure known as the Skyreaching Tower. It was Qing Tian's pride and joy, and it was also going to be Yi's battleground. In Qing Tian's eyes, the tower was an absolute eyesore, but hey, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Judging by Qing Tian's expression, his taste must have gone completely haywire. He had a million things on his mind, like the gadgets that kept the tower from toppling over in the wind. The materials he picked sparked an idea, and he wondered if Xiao Shang would be willing to fork over some cash for it. If he did, that would be a nice little payday. Qing Tian was getting a tad annoyed with all his inner monologuing, but he played it cool because if he lost it, his soul might just take a vacation, and spoiler alert, nobody wants that kind of drama. As they stepped inside the tower, Ye asked what the trial was all about. Qing Tian revealed it had 6 floors total, with Yi's current skills. Taking down the Shadow Wyvern on the first floor would be a whole adventure. He asked if that was the creature looming ahead, but he didn't sense any menace. Peeking at the Shadow Wyvern, it looked tiny. It didn't even reach his knee. Seriously, it was more lizard-like than anything. Smacking that thing around felt like picking on a toddler. Qing Tian warned him not to get too cocky. He attempted a friendly pat, but the creature lit up ominously. Its eyes were fierce, exuding a serious vibe. Then, bam, it knocked him backward and leaped at him. A new tidbit got logged into the Shadow knowledge base. It detailed an alternate prison in another dimension where creatures of various races called home. One of these lovely joints was the Skyreaching Tower, crafted by Qing Tian himself. This tower had 6 floors each, crawling with Qing Tian's minions. The Shadow Wyvern, ranking at C, had a skill called Shadow Enhancement. After using it, its size, speed, and strength rocketed by 600%, with weaknesses helpfully outlined. An increase of 600% made Yi feel like he was whipping out a budget knockoff. Qing Tian remarked that that was because Yi's constitution was way below par compared to his pets. He couldn't wrap his head around that. He leaped to evade an incoming attack. As he got ready with his knives, he thought that the bigger the creature, the more blind spots it must have. He hurled his knives at the back of the Shadow Wyvern, but they barely tickled its defenses. It was mind-boggling how tough it was. Seeing Yi hesitate, Qing Tian jabbed at him that with his wimpy strength, his hits were just light slaps to the wyvern. He activated Shadow Enhancement again. Qing Tian told him if he didn't manage to tame it, he'd be stuck on the first floor forever. He slashed at the Shadow Wyvern from every angle, but it didn't even flinch. Qing Tian noticed Yi was already playing with Shadow Enhancement, and the shadow was already fine-tuned, so he cranked the intensity up a notch. To add fuel to the fire, his minion was getting peckish too. He joked that Ye looked rather tasty. The wyvern's eyes shone with excitement, and it darted for Ye. Ye took off like his sneakers were on fire. The Shadow Wyvern was drooling as it chased him down. This made him wonder if Qing Tian's pet was on some kind of high because it was acting wild. Qing Tian clarified that he had worn it out a bit, and now it probably viewed Ye as a delicious energy snack. He muttered about how unfair this was. A fight is a fight, but the wyvern was fixated on trying to bite him. He hatched a plan since it was hungry. He tossed some chicken legs into the arena as his secret weapon. The Shadow Wyvern got distracted, zeroing in on one of them. He sweet-talked the creature, claiming it was finger-licking good, and then restrained it. His clever ruse worked like a charm. Taming the Shadow Wyvern was a success. Access to the first floor rights was granted. Qing Tian was disappointed and totally flustered by his gluttonous pet. It just couldn't resist chicken. The system informed Ye he had unlocked the binding and activation rights for the gate of the alternate prison. He wanted to know what those were for. Qing Tian explained that once recharged, each fragment transforms into a portal connected to the alternate prison. So effectively, if Yi bound a fragment from that dimension, he could pop open a portal whenever he wanted. Scoring such a sweet ability on the first floor made him think the next 5 levels would be a wild ride. Qingtian thought Yi was getting a little too big for his boots, just because he cleared the first floor with a sneaky trick. So he nudged him toward the second floor for some extra heat. He encouraged him to see what was in store. He let him know that the guards there were merely the Skyreaching Tower's fluffers. You could tell he had something mischievous up his sleeve. He figured there would be more of those shape-shifting creatures lurking inside. Logically speaking, considering how chaotic the pet on the first floor had been, the second floor wouldn't exactly be a walk in the park. He nudged him to take a peek before making any decisions, promising him. Logically speaking, since the pet on the first floor was already a handful, the second floor wasn't exactly going to be a cakewalk. He urged him to take a peek first before making a decision. It's not like it's a lethal trap or anything. They hit the second floor, and Yi flung open the door. He was completely blindsided by what he saw. The Thunder Serpent King Hydro Turtle and Lava Minotaur were all chilling in Kank, like it was a Saturday night cocktail party. He started to wonder if these creatures could actually be labeled as servants, or if they were just gatecrashers at the bash. Suddenly, all the monsters lunged at our hero. He dove sideways to dodge the madness, only to figure out the entrance was locked tighter than a clam at a conspiracy convention. The Thunder Serpent King barked orders to take out the intruder. Li Yi pulled off a slick Shadow J move to dodge the incoming wrath, then cranked up his shadow power like it was a turbo boost. He sprinted like a cat on fire, making a beeline for a door. He busted through and slammed the door shut behind him, letting out a sigh of relief. But then the realization hit him like a freight train. Qingtian totally played him when he said there were just servants in there. Qingtian insisted he wasn't lying. Those were indeed servants. His powers just stank like old cheese. Then the nerve of him questioned what the Lava Minotaur could actually do. Qingtian responded that it provides heat like a walking furnace, so that's a neat party trick. Then he moved on to the Thunder Serpent King. When asked, he casually said it supplied electricity like he was showcasing its brand new gadgets. Finally, when asked about the Hydro Turtle, he said it was the designated floor mop. Ye was relentless, not done yet. He also wanted to know what the other worlders were up to. Qingtian explained they did chores, shuffled things around, and ran errands. Qingtian had this smug grin on his face, while Ye looked like he was trying to decode a bad dad joke. Out of nowhere, the system buzzed about an A-rank lifeform rolling in. It turned out to be Xiaoshang and Sane making their dramatic entrance. Ye was puzzled about their visit. Xiaoshan casually mentioned he got wind from Sane that Ye had tangled with the Black Panther gang. He confirmed that the Black Panther gang already had him locked in their sights. Instead of playing it safe, he decided to go on the offensive. Xiaoshang pointed out that the Black Panther gang had been poking the bear on Longman 3rd Street for ages, but hadn't acted on it yet. Ye suspected it was because they were too chicken to stir the pot, and he hit the nail on the head. The 3 major players in Haicheng were in a standoff. Wian Chao, the city lord, was pulling the political strings, Ning Donga's NG group was running the money flow, and Xiaoshang held power in both worlds, only below them. Even though he couldn't stand the Black Panther gang's constant bullying and strong-arming of merchants, he couldn't risk taking action against them without facing serious repercussions. Making a move against the Black Panther gang could force Ning Donghao and Wu Tiano to join forces or leave both him and Ning in deep trouble, allowing Wian to swoop in for the kill. Ye went straight for the jugular, asking if he was saying he didn't want the chin. Xiao Zhan smirked and said what he really wanted was for Ye and Xian to kickstart a squad to take down the Black Panther gang. He grinned and asked if the president was trying to plot a proxy war. Xiao Zhan clapped in admiration, then casually mentioned he'd handle the funds and manpower while Ye took charge of the action. That way, the other 2 powers would think twice before acting rashly, and even if things went south, he could swoop in to ensure their safety. Ye had to admit he was genuinely impressed by how the president conjured this whole scheme in just one night. He joked that if his daughter wasn't so dead set on tackling the Black Panther gang with him, he might have clocked out for the day. He also wondered what he was starting to think about sending Sane off somewhere or wrapping her up like a present. Ye had a look of disgust, wishing the president would keep his family drama under wraps. Sane forced her father to vacate the room. Then she closed the door behind him. She eyed Ye and asked him what his next move was. he made up his mind to tackle some missions. He was set to snatch up every job related to the public dimensional gateways. He figured he had to hit every dimensional gateway in Haiche to kickstart his plans. Ye grinned mischievously as he imagined the day he bagged those fragments. It would mark the start of the Black Panther gang's worst nightmare. The next day, Sane burst in, showing off the crew she'd carefully assembled. From that moment on, they were the Shadow Crew under Ye's command. And the soldiers greeted the Miss and the Chief. Since Ye took his sweet time picking a name, she just decided to name it after his powers instead. She quizzed him if he minded. He shrugged and said it was a good name. He gave them a once-over. They were all C-rank. A gang like that would pack quite a punch anywhere. He wondered why they were all rocking masks. She explained that it was to keep their identities from being exploited against them. Plus, she added it looked pretty darn cool. He quipped that it was probably just the artist being too lazy and asked what his next strategy was. He revealed it was time to grab some gigs. He was gunning to snatch every possible mission from the Black Panther gang. There were plenty of jobs floating around, so Can raised an eyebrow, unsure if they could juggle it all. He reassured her they'd be okay, because they'd only... A little later, a man faced the wrath of the higher-ups. He was being called trash for allowing a newbie group like the Shadow Gang to swipe their missions. Bao yelled at him that he didn't need him telling him how to do his job, especially since those folks were just looking for trouble. The man shot back that they were out of their league. This escalated into a situation where Bao grabbed him by the collar, demanding to know what he meant. The man explained would go down as the crappiest time for the Black Panther gang. The following day, Cena swung open the door to unveil the crew she had hand-picked. Henceforth, they were the squad of shadows serving under Ye's rule. Those soldier-like guys greeted the Miss and the Chief. Since Ye couldn't decide on a name for ages, she went ahead and named it after his skills. She asked if he wasn't fond of it. He replied that it was a solid name. He cast his eyes over them. They were all C-rank, meaning they could dish out quite a hit anywhere. He asked why they were all sporting masks. She explained that it was to keep their identities on the down low and not to be used against them. Plus, she added it looked pretty awesome. He joked that it was just the artist getting lazy with drawing faces. Cian asked about their next steps. He said it was time to snatch some jobs. He was plotting to grab every single commission gig from the Black Panther gang. There were tons of jobs out there. So Can questioned if they could actually handle it all. He assured her they'd be fine because they'd only take the valuable ones, and for the rest, he had a little plan. A bit later, a man faced the storm of the higher-ups. He got branded trash for letting a rookie group like the Shadow Gang pluck their missions. Bao yelled at him that he didn't need to point out what he was doing wrong, since those folks were just itching to stir up trouble. He should have sent someone to deal with them. The man retorted that there was no way to handle them. That made Bao grab him by the collar and ask what the man explained. It's like clockwork. Whenever there's a mission, the Shadow Gang sends out 5 or 6 C-rank folks, and surprise, surprise, they're running low on C-rank minions. Bao found himself incredibly intrigued about where this ragtag bunch was popping up from. He waved his magic wand, aka cash, and ordered them to snag some exploration slots, dispatching the troops to scope out their quarry. The guy replied that the hot item for the upcoming expedition had already been snatched up by some shady characters. Bao was absolutely fuming when he chimed in, "I don't care. Whether you have to pilfer or shell out serious bucks, I want you to do whatever it takes to get my crew in." He tossed in a friendly little threat warning that if he messed up this golden opportunity for riches, he'd be in deep trouble. The dude took off, muttering a yes. The next day at Sen's pad, they were all just hanging out when Sean was chattering away on the phone. She got the lowdown that the Black Panther gang had forked over big bucks for all those exploration slots they had stashed. She turned to Ye and asked how he knew they'd get snatched up. He flashed a smirk, fully aware they couldn't resist the biggest money grab of the season. Cien was scratching her head, completely lost. Ye decided to spill the beans on the hidden drama of mining site politics. To rake in more cash, the big shots hide the good stuff and quirky ores. They always pull their classic end-of-season maintenance to sneak things out for a sale. In the past, the Black Panther gang recruited mercs to plant scouts and check out their targets. Since everything they jacked was illegal, no one ratted them, but now that the road to easy pickings was blocked, of course, they'd shell out for exploration slots to access alternate dimensions. Sean put her thinking cap on and realized that even if they sold those slots at a premium, they were still just raking in pocket change. He sensed there was more to the tale than that. His adventures through those alternate dimensions weren't just for kicks. He popped open a portal and revealed that he had already mapped out all the alternate dimension entrances in Hai Chi. They could open a small gateway to any of those bad boys anytime they wanted. So the game plan was to keep a close eye on the folks who snagged those luxurious slots and figure out what prize the Black Panther gang had in their sights. With that golden nugget of intel, they could swoop in and take them down. Pure genius. Yeah, didn't want too many folks knowing about those fancy entrances, so he had CN pick a couple of trusted sidekicks. She was itching to tag along. She loved playing the hero. That made him grin, and he was on board together they'd take out the bad guys. Meanwhile, in the alternate dimension, a truck cruised along, and the driver was daydreaming about a shipment worth a small fortune. His buddy, whom he affectionately nicknamed Wang, promised him his piece of the action. Suddenly, a sharp rock popped up in their path, towering over them as they chatted away, and they were both scratching their heads. Then more rocks shot up like they were auditioning for a sequel to Jaws. The folks riding in the back of the truck rattled like maracas until, bam, the truck collided with a wall. The front seat passenger leaped out and barked to check if the cargo was all good. A guy in a brown suit showed up and confidently stated, "Absolutely, it's perfectly fine." Then they took off as the guy hurled the spiky rocks at them, but he wasn't about to let them escape without some theatrics. That's when Ye swooped in, eager to give the guy a brand new headache. He performed a shadow jaunt and appeared right behind him. The guy was livid, yelling at Ye like a schoolyard bully. Ye charged at him, declaring, "Hey, robbing folks is one thing." The guy was floored by Ye's speed. He scrambled to grab a stone to defend himself, but Ye was already 2 steps ahead, grabbing his face with a smirk, taking lives so casually. Not cool, buddy. Ye slammed the dude's head against the wall with a satisfying thud, leaving a nice dent as a souvenir. The guy was losing his marbles, demanding to know who the heck Ye was and suggesting he better stand down, otherwise his local pals would rain down fury on him. What about the D-ranks Scene brought? He stammered wide-eyed. Scene asked what they ought to do with the hostiles. Ye replied, "Oh no, we're not exterminating them. That'd be too kind for the Blood Panther gang. I've got a better plan." The guy gulped and asked what brilliant scheme Ye had in mind. Ye ordered him to scoot and let Bao know that Lei of the Shadow Gang was the mastermind behind the hospital incident. Bao, who was preoccupied with looking after his injured lackeys, was fuming when he caught wind of the news. He couldn't believe that pesky little brat had gotten so powerful. His secretary interrupted, pointing out that the tricky part was that even though their crew seemed injury-free on the surface, they were nursing nasty comminuted fractures all over. Even with top-notch medical care, it would take them half a year to recover. And that's going to cost them no less than $5 million each. With 60 injured folks, that racked up to a jaw-dropping $30 million. Just then, a message pinged in with terrible news the other 2 teams couldn't hack it. Either Bao demanded to know who was the mastermind behind the chaos, and the reply was yeah. Bao asked, how in the world is that even possible? Those 3 alternate dimensions are hundreds of kilometers apart. Even if Ye could fly, there's no way he could show up at all of them at once. The secretary, grinning devilishly, showed him the video their crews secretly recorded. In the footage, Ye was using a guy's head like a trampoline while others screamed like they were in a horror movie. Ye turned towards the camera and asked the dude if he was trying out for a secret filming role, or else his pals in the area would make his life a nightmare. He inquired about the D-ranks that Scene brought. The man was taken aback upon seeing them. Scene asked what their next step should be with those individuals. She wanted to confirm if the plan was to wipe them out. Ye shook his head, saying that letting them go would be letting the Blood Panther gang off the hook way too easy. He had a different idea. The man faltered and asked, "What's that?" Ye commanded him to go tell Bao that Lei of the Shadow Gang was responsible for all the mayhem at the hospital. Bao stormed over to his battered guy and got irate at the update. It made him ponder how that pesky miner had gained so much power. His assistant replied that the tricky part was that on the surface, their guys didn't seem injured at all, but secretly, they all had shattered bones and wounds throughout. Even with top-tier medical attention, they'd still be out for half a year, and that would set them back by at least $5 million each. So for 60 people, that totaled $30 million. Just then, a message buzzed in. The other two teams had flopped as well. Bao asked who was the mastermind behind it, and the reply was, it was Ye. He questioned how that could even be possible, since the three alternate dimensions were hundreds of kilometers apart. Even if Ye could fly, there was no way he could pop up in all of them at the same time. His assistant showed him the secret footage their guys had recorded to prove it wasn't a hoax. In that clip, Ye was standing on a guy's head while chaos erupted in the background. Ye turned to the camera asking the man if he was filming undercover. In that clip, Ye was standing on some guy's head while all hell broke loose in the background. Ye turned to the camera asking the guy if he was filming undercover or just auditioning for a circus. The poor camera operator nearly lost his lunch at the sight of him. Ye chirped to Bao through the screen, throwing some serious shade about his not-so-impressive henchmen. He tossed down the challenge, daring him to show his face, fully aware it would cost him an arm and a leg. Treating those lackeys for 6 months to a year must have drained his wallet faster than a kid in a candy store. Bao crunched the tablet in a fit of rage, vowing to get even in the warehouse. Kan raised an eyebrow and questioned why they even bothered showing up there. He elaborated that he trailed Ji and stumbled upon the Black Panther gang's hideout right next door. Those clowns had been messing up his plans for the last few days, and he assumed he'd be the one leading the charge next. Kan guessed he was planning on robbing his warehouse while Bao was off playing Marco Polo. Just then, his phone buzzed like a squirrel on caffeine. One of his guys called in to let him know that Bao and his crew had already taken off to alternate dimension number 3. He shot orders back to keep their eyes peeled. He informed Kian that Bao was taking matters into his own hands, and she needed to make sure everything stayed kosher. He'd give Bao a run for his money to buy her some breathing room. Since Bao was only a B rank, she suggested sending Duano with him. He waved that off, claiming it wasn't needed. He wasn't looking for a full-blown brawl, and bringing Dwayne Owl would just complicate things. He reassured her there was no need to panic, and even if things got hairy, he could pop back through the gate in a heartbeat. She urged him to be careful. Thus, even if he ran into a sticky situation, he could hightail it back through the gate in no time. She warned him to keep an eye out. Then he stepped into the gate. In the alternate dimension, Bao was cackling like a kid in a candy shop as his crew happily trucked off with some prime loot. A blonde dude swaggered up to Bao, declaring himself the genius behind the bold move. Meanwhile, Ye's tough crew didn't even dare to peek out. Bao felt as cozy as a cat in a sunbeam, believing that a kid with a bunch of C-rank sidekicks wouldn't cause any trouble until he felt a shiver in the air. Suddenly, he bellowed, demanding to know who was sneaking around. One of his men found himself in a chokehold. It was Ye who made his entrance like a magician at a bad birthday party. He complimented Bao's keen instincts while holding the guy hostage. Then he hit him with a cheeky jab, questioning why everyone looked so stressed when he was just a small fry. The guy whimpered, begging for his boss to rescue him. Ye warned him to hold still, or he might end up being just a headless body. Bao responded by launching a fireball, insisting they could both go out in flames together. His minion was flabbergasted. The guy wailed like a banshee as he went up in smoke. Then someone shrieked out of nowhere that Ye had disappeared. Bao felt a tingle creeping up his spine. Ye taunted him for being a great leader while neglecting his own crew. Bao whipped out another fireball. That's when he noticed one of his crew blazing up while yelling that he'd missed. Ye joked that working for him was a risky business. The underlings urged Bao to chill, but he was convinced that if he could just take Ye out, he'd gladly sacrifice a few minions along the way. He whipped up a fiery tornado, eager to see where Ye would bolt next. His underlings skedaddled for the hills, desperate to evade the chaos. Ye stood ground as the wails of fiery men echoed around. When the fire tornado crashed closer, he ducked behind a boulder. Bao yelled for him to show himself. Ye figured he couldn't afford to underestimate a B rank and decided it was best to beat it. He was excited to see Bao's face when he returned. That night at the warehouse, someone was wailing like a banshee, demanding to know what on earth just happened. The underlings squeaked out that it was the Shadow Gang and the eldest miss from the Chin family. They brought along 2 B ranks and over a dozen C ranks, and there was nothing they could do to stop them. Bao gritted his teeth like a jackhammer. One of his men, shaking like a leaf, pleaded for mercy. Bao, without an ounce of pity, set him ablaze like a bonfire. Now Bao pieced together why Ye suddenly had a little army behind him because of Sane. With that realization, he couldn't exactly blame Ye for the brutality. Jiaha declared the situation had reached its end. But Bao couldn't just roll over with everything he owned in that warehouse. It was a fortune worth hundreds of millions. Shihao asked what his plan was, suggesting lending him a few men to spark a turf war with the Qin family. He reminded Bao that even if Xiaoeng had taken a vacation, Hai Qini was not someone they could mess with. Plus, they were in a crucial stage of their experiment. So regardless of how frustrated Bao felt, he needed to hold his horses for the greater good. Bao shot back that he couldn't deal with this for another second. The worst-case scenario was offing Ye and packing his bags from Hai Qini. His resolve crumbled as several monsters loomed over him, while Shiha warned him that if he kept chasing after death, he wouldn't mind putting him on mute. That knocked him to one knee. Shiha cautioned him not to put the grand scheme at risk over a trivial amount. As long as the experiment came through, he'd be the first one to help him open. Bao was coerced into saying yes, but inside he was boiling because it felt like Shihao couldn't care less since his own riches weren't on the line. He despised the humiliation he felt. He figured Shihao thought without him, Bao wouldn't stand a chance against Qin. Meanwhile, in a flashy red car, Sin was chatting away all swoony over Yi's sharp thinking. Owl urged the driver to step on it, knowing the young miss had a soft spot for Ye. Her cheeks turned crimson. She protested, asking when she ever said that. Al chimed in that since she woke up, she'd dropped Ye's name a whopping 24 times. She argued that it's only because he's a buddy. But suddenly, a red truck came barreling towards them like a runaway freight train. Ao jumped in front of her like a human shield, yelling for her to watch out. He braced for the impact, holding her tight as the truck crashed into them. After the dust cleared, all the water it carried gushed out, creating a chaotic fountain. The guards rushed over to Sin, asking if she was all right. She nodded, saying she was fine, while they all stared at the fiery wreckage that used to be their car. After that, the water gushed out, creating a makeshift fountain. The guards hurried over to Sin, double-checking if she was okay. She replied that she was fine while watching their car go up in flames. Out of the blue, someone sneaked up behind them. Sin had this uncanny ability and instantly recognized the guy. It was Bao. He barked at the guards to keep the young lady out of harm's way. Kian shot a smirk at Bao, playfully calling him too full of himself to even consider taking them on with such a small crew. Suddenly, she started feeling all kinds of weird. Her body was making all sorts of noises. She asked what was going on, and he joked that it was just the water being all dramatic. They were drenched from the fountain truck's splash fest. Bao joined in, saying he wouldn't budge until he was assured of a sure thing. He theatrically revealed that they were now covered in goo from a phantom spider. Bao had one of his minions shield him with an umbrella, while the rest of them looked like they were about to head into a monsoon donning raincoats. Even a high-flying A rank would be out cold for 10 hours if they got a whiff of this stuff. At this point, Sin's guards were already out like lights. When Bao decided to attack, he yelled for the young lady to run for dear life. Bao got a hold of him by the neck and showered him with compliments like he was handing out gold stars. Then he set him on fire and quipped that loyal bodyguards often meet a rather unfortunate end. Can watched the fiery show with wide eyes. Back at the house, Ye was putting in some serious work. He was performing a shadow jaunt, weaving between the training poles and chopping them down like they were soft butter. Those wooden poles didn't stand a chance. Qing noticed Ye was getting slick with his moves. He shrugged it off, saying it was a given since he was already a C rank. Suddenly his phone buzzed, and he assumed it was Cien calling. Xian teased, questioning whether Kank was really that strong just because he had a pinch of extra strength. But when Yi glanced at his phone, his face turned into a panic-filled masterpiece, and he dropped his dagger like it was on fire. When he spotted Bao gripping Sin by her hair, he was momentarily stunned. Then the rage kicked in. He demanded to know what on earth Bao thought he was doing. Bao grinned, stating that his next move hinged on how much Sane meant to him. He laid out two enticing choices: either fork over a ransom of 1 billion or sit back and witness her torture unfold in a very theatrical fashion. Cien tried to wave that this was an ambush, but he wasn't shy about tossing around the cash. He asked where the handover would take place. Bao pointed him to his warehouse, insisting he had to fly solo with the billion within 1 hour. If he even hinted to the Qin family, Cien would be toast too. Chinton jumped in, reminding Yi of his strength and warning him not to throw his life away. but Ye couldn't just leave a comrade hanging besides. Who knows who might kick the bucket at the warehouse? Ye arrived, and Bao acknowledged his guts. He asked about the cash, but Ye stood his ground, wanting to see Sin first. Bao commanded his crew to fetch her. The crane lifted, and Ye's jaw hit the floor at the sight. Sin was dangling like a forgotten piñata, mouth gagged and all. Ye opened his stash and dropped the dough. Bao's goons checked it out and reported it was all good. Now that Bao had the cash, Ye expected him to let Sin go. But Bao dropped the bomb that he hadn't done away with her yet because he was waiting for the money. Now that he had it, he had no plans to let Ye waltz off without a memento. He thought Ye must be lacking a few fries in his happy meal. If he thought otherwise, Ye realized he wouldn't keep his promise and pressed a button. A dazzling light erupted from the stacks of cash. Then he bolted away using a shadow jaunt. The money exploded into a cloud of smoke. Bao shouted, asking where he had vanished to. Out of nowhere, Ye appeared right behind him. He dodged the dagger like a pro. Then he followed up with a fireball, saying he wasn't about to lose to such minor sneak attacks. Ye quipped if he wasn't taught to be polite, especially when playing with fire during a dust storm. A fierce gust of wind swept through, and kaboom, another explosion shook the place. Cien worried about Ye, when suddenly the rope got severed and down she went. She braced for impact, but nada happened. When she opened her eyes, there he was holding her like a baby, while they soared on a Shadow Wyvern. Bao stood there, jaw dropped, as a flying dragon charged towards the entrance of an alternate dimension. He realized this kid had more tricks up his sleeve than a magician. Bao wanted to catch them both and claim the whole shebang, but heard that over half of his crew was already healing their wounds. He yelled for whoever could still stand to chase after them and not let them escape. They followed into the alternate dimension too. Ye stormed into the tower. The Can panicked at the sight of the Black Panther gang crashing the party. He shrugged it off, saying this was just the excuse he needed to let those goons handle a little cleanup. He told her to hide with the Shadow Wyvern. She hesitated, but he assured her it would be fine. Ching figured out that Ye left the door open on purpose to use them like a battering ram to smash through the second level. Ye nodded, confirming he never claimed he would tackle the second level alone. He admitted he was pretty lucky at spotting loopholes. Ye added that the reward for clearing the second level was way too tempting. An armor that could withstand an A-rank attack was utterly appealing, but then fire started falling on him. Those guys were being cautious, warning him he had nowhere to run now, but he had no plans to flee. He had already saved Cen. It was the perfect time to settle the score with them. Bao laughed at him, thinking he'd lost his mind. He told his crew not to feel intimidated since it was just one guy. They'd finish him off and then enjoy some quality time with the eldest young miss of the Qin family. Ye wasn't going to act like he could outnumber them, but when it came to everything else, he wasn't so sure. He called everyone to come out and welcome their guests. When the doors swung open, dozens of eyes appeared, including the Lava Minotaur, Thunder Serpent King, Hydro Turtle, and a few others. He welcomed them and thanked them for joining him in this little escapade. The Black Panther, they'd take care of him first, then go find Can. After all that, they promised him a taste of the eldest young miss of the Qin family. Ye conceded that he was outnumbered, but when it came to everything else, it was still a toss-up. He called for everyone to come out and give a warm welcome to their guests. When the doors swung open, several eyes popped up, and out came the Lava Minotaur, Thunder Serpent King, Hydro Turtle, and a few others. He welcomed them and expressed gratitude for joining him in this challenge. The Black Panther gang was left completely flat-footed. The monsters charged right at them like they were on a school field trip gone wrong. Bao whipped up a fireball with his fist and fired a humongous flaming orb straight at the monsters. A few of them got caught in the crispy mess. The blaze then zoomed straight toward Ye like it had a vendetta. Ye realized he had busted out his ultimate move. He whipped out his shadow morph and turned it into a hammer. He aimed to crank Bao's anger to maximum overdrive, but not before doing a little damage control. He smashed the fireball, making it go kaboom. The explosion was wild, and he suddenly understood that rolling his eyes at B-rank attacks was not the best idea. Flames scattered and rained down on the monsters below, but Bao, he just stood there like a mannequin, totally unfazed by Yi's current state. Deep down, he had a nagging feeling he wouldn't be blocking any more hits today. Ye reassured him that one whack was all he needed, and if he didn't believe him, he should just take a gander around. The monsters had encircled Bao like he was the main attraction at the circus. Bao was starting to look a tad jumpy. Ye told him to mess around with them first while he made a sneaky exit. He was totally ticked off about being outsmarted by that little brat again. Clenching his fist, he yelled at the beast to scram. They turned to cinders the moment he connected. His annoyance with Ye was off the charts, veins popping on his forehead like a bad cartoon gag as he hollered he'd rip him apart. Meanwhile, deep in the core area of the second level, Ye wanted to make sure Chingan wasn't pulling a fast one on him again. He couldn't help but ask if there was really armor ahead that could withstand an A-rank attack. King Tian had no reason to spin a yarn. He confirmed it was the grand prize for clearing the second level. Out of the blue, something showed up. A creature knelt before them. It was Jimming, the steward of the second level. Chingan cheekily asked Ye to help him bury the steward after they sorted out the whole Black Panther mix-up. He eagerly agreed. Ching Tian thanked him, then fell silent for a moment, eyeing the steward like a kid with a cookie jar. After that, he confidently led the way toward the armor. Just when they were making strides, Ye spotted something else. Another creature stood in their path. It was the shadow armor Chingan had mentioned. He joked that it was nowhere near as ugly as he had pictured. Chingan grumbled that it was a shame the brat was still stuck at Shadow Enhancement Tier 2. Even if he hit Tier 3, facing armor that could stand up to A-rank attacks would still be a tall order. Yi couldn't help but notice Chingan's peculiar behavior, so he nudged. "What's eating you?" Ching Tian insisted he was fine, and nudged him to grab the reward. Yi picked up on how Chingan was becoming more dramatic by the day. The armor shivered just a little, then clamped down on Yi's neck. It announced it hadn't seen a master in ages and never expected one to show up again. The armor's soul was like a dramatic ghost with too many feelings, and it unleashed a B-rank skill shadow enhancement tier 2, soul refinement. Ye was left thinking, what in the world is going on here? Ching Tian recognized it was the steward trapped inside the armor. The armor was not happy, grumbling that it never thought its esteemed master would be stuck playing house in the body of a C-rank nobody. Chan snapped at it to stop choking Ye, but the armor was insulted at being bossed around. With clenched teeth, it demanded to know what right he had to command it when his soul was been dwelling in the armor, waiting for his return to keep him limping along, and here he was a mere shadow of his previous self. So it had to refine him to break through to Shadow Enhancement Tier 3 and turn that armor into a vessel for its soul. Ching Tian was screaming as he began to fade away like a ghost at daylight. Yi wondered if he could overpower that guy if he stepped aside and handed over the controls to his body. Jian raised an eyebrow, asking if he wasn't worried about losing control entirely. He couldn't believe he was still cracking jokes amidst the chaos. If he had any intention of taking over fully, he would never have lent the body in the first place. Ching Tian scoffed, and they went for it. Ye's eyes sparked with power as he unleashed a blast, sending the armor sailing. But the armor shot back that with just a wisp of his soul, it had only A-rank strength. So why bother with a pointless struggle? He shot back that even at A-rank that was plenty to deal with. Ye then entered an entropic or parasitic state. But a rank skill couldn't be pulled off in that form. The armor recognized his shadow domain move. Ching Tian, now in Ye's body, strolled toward him, cloaked in a black mist. The armor caught on that it was merely a second-tier bluff. It couldn't believe Chingan was hiding something and hadn't taught him the full scope of shadow skills. Ching then charged up his shadow morph, unleashing an infinite sword array, but the armor didn't even bat an eye. It was convinced one secret skill wouldn't tip the scales, since it knew the body couldn't bear a Tier 3 skill anyway. Ching used Shadow Jaunt to sneak up behind it, ready to throw a punch. The armor had zero idea what that technique was. Ching Tian threw a punch, but the armor blocked it with its great sword. Feeling cocky, it figured he couldn't hold that form forever. Ching Tian asked Yi if he was still holding on. Yi replied that he was in tip-top shape. The armor smirked, sneering that jabs at that level wouldn't even scratch its defenses. Ching leaped, planning to force him out of the armor. The armor parried his fist with its sword. They both remained locked in combat stances for a moment until the sword shattered like glass. Ching Tian threw another punch, but the armor defended against it using its forearms. Just a smidge more, and Ching Tian would have pulled it off. The soul was nearly yanked from its body, but then he felt a sharp pain. Ye insisted he was fine, but he realized that if this fight kept up, Yi's soul and body would soon be incinerated by the raging energy. The armor laughed at them, mocking them for letting the chance slip by. Qing clicked his tongue in exasperation. Just then, the armor geared up to land a punch. Qing was sent flying away from Ye's body. Qing was flabbergasted. The armor had totally outsmarted him. He was feeling pretty caged in. Never did he imagine that the little furball he raised would serve him a hefty slice of karma. Meanwhile, the armor was over the moon, thinking it could pull a Lazarus and come back to life. Yi was down on one knee, looking like he just sprinted a marathon, but his mind was all about Qing Tian. The armor sauntered over, and Qing Tian told him to hit the bricks, but Yi charged at the armor, hoping to break those chains and set him free. Talk about a heartwarming scene. One was fretting over the other's feelings, getting singed, and held back on unleashing his full power. The other, basically the size of an ant, still had the nerve to throw a punch at the armor. The armor sent Ye flying. The impact had him coughing up crimson. Chint told him he was just a seer rank, so he should stop being a nuisance and vamoose. Ye shot back that from the very start. He'd been treated like a personal punching bag, forced to battle otherworlders and level up like it was a video game, until he had no choice but to comply. So now, whether to stick around or bounce was all his decision. He charged at the armor once more. Ye had previously absorbed the surrounding shadow energy and had taken out a Blood Leopard, so this time he felt like he could send that traitor packing. The armor taunted him, asking how long his body could keep pummeling forward. Qintian called him a fool, as if he was itching for his body to pop. Ye yelled back that it was none of their business. He gathered his strength to charge again, but his body felt like it was cracking like an old egg. He could see it falling apart, slowly fading into the void. The armor remarked on how adorable the little creature Qing Tian picked was embarking on its tiny suicide mission. Chiddington was fading too. The armor told him to stop squirming. It was hungry for a nice snack. He gleefully absorbed him, laughing to himself, but out of the blue, a shadow fell over him. He scratched his head in confusion, realizing it was eternal night. It might have been caused by the eternal domain. He couldn't believe his eyes, especially since he hadn't even finished refining Qing Tian. This made him suspect this mess wasn't his handiwork at all. To his shock, a voice came from behind it. Was Yi, just as he warned before the armor would be the one getting the boot. Acting on instinct, he slashed, but to his surprise, Nada happened. Yi's stats popped up, showing he was human race C rank, with a shadow enhancement at tier 3. His skills were quite impressive: Ultimate Shadow Eye, Shadow Morph, Shadow Jaunt, and Shadow Domain. Shadow Domain allows the user to tweak their form and the shadow energy within the domain, supercharging all shadow abilities while slashing their cost. Every soul defeated in that domain transformed into shadow energy. The armor sweated buckets, seeing he reached tier 3. Ye figured out what powered the shadow domain those souls. No wonder the armor was sweating bullets over it. He was itching to know what would happen to the soul once it was unarmored. He unleashed a concentrated orb of power, raining down on it like a comet. The armor jumped to dodge it. Suddenly, Ye popped up behind him, trying to yank him out of the armor. He delivered a mighty punch to his back that sent him crashing to the ground with a massive thud. The armor reasoned that being tier 3 didn't matter because he was still C rank, and that armor could take even the biggest beatings. Ye grinned, deciding to flip the script since the outside attack wasn't getting the job done. He charged again. The armor noticed how reckless he was and threw a punch which just went right through him like he was a ghost. Ye's body was as evasive as air, so he glided right past. Ye moved in close, letting his shadow seep into the armor, causing the soul inside to scream like it just stubbed its toe. He tried to yank it out, and after a tussle, the soul popped free. It was ejected, and Ye snagged the armor, realizing why it had been hiding in there. Apparently, the armor was absorbing shadow energy to cradle the soul. The steward, whose soul was in the armor, knew that pulling it out would weaken him. But now that Ye had Qing Tian locked in, he took to the skies. Naturally, Ye wasn't about to let him slip away. He chained him up, but the steward warned Ye that since Quan was tangled in his soul, if he launched an attack, he'd get hurt too. Ye reminded him that souls were just shadow energy and the armor's protection had flown the coop. Ye ripped him apart, and Qing Tian was set free. Jing Gian watched as Ye absorbed the soul for a tasty snack. Qing Tian told the soul it woefully underestimated a human's thirst for power. The soul shot back that they shouldn't get too cocky, because if the human leveled up too quickly from devouring him, Qing Tian wouldn't be safe either. No living being could withstand that hunger for power. After Ye absorbed him, he let out a colossal wail. His body was flooded with power that even made the ground tremble. Qing Tian was left speechless. Ye leveled up to B rank. Then he called out to Qing, telling him it was his time to shine. Qinggan shouted Ye's name. Ye beamed and linked up with him. While he was at it, he also snatched the armor, sharing that he finally understood what the steward meant about living on. He placed the armor inside Qinchin's body. He figured he would use his own domain ability to seal the soul in the armor, and now the hunk of metal had transformed into his new vessel. So Qinchin leveled up to A rank with a whole array of shadow enhancement skills, including Ultimate Shadow, Eye Shadow, Morph Shadow, Jaunt Shadow, Domain, and Shadow Clone. Qinchin couldn't believe his eyes. He pointed out how dark and nasty Qint was joking that absorbing him might lead to some serious tummy troubles. Plus, that armor was ginormous and ugly, so he wasn't keen on wearing it. Qinchin was utterly amazed. He remarked how Qint looked super dark and grimy, saying that absorbing him might lead to some serious bathroom emergencies. On top of that, the armor was gigantic and hideous, so he wasn't thrilled about the idea of wearing it. He zeroed in on him serving up a big ol' slice of karma. Meanwhile, up on the second floor, a gigantic snake was having the time of its life, wrapping itself around Bao's poor sidekick, who was begging for mercy like a kid caught red-handed with his hand in the cookie jar. Bao told him to hold on tight because he was about to squash his little playtime real quick. With that, he threw down some serious fire and cooked both the snake and the unfortunate dude like they were on a barbecue grill. Once the smoke settled, he casually remarked that a loser like that wasn't even worth saving in the first place. He felt a bit off balance when he spotted Ye, wondering if this was what a B rank looked like. Those critters were just warm-up acts to him. Just seeing Ye got Bao's blood boiling, and he sprung at him with a fist on fire. But Qingyan shot him a look powerful enough to topple a skyscraper and sent Bao flying like a balloon in a child's birthday bash. Bao quickly figured out he was squaring off against an A rank. Nothing like being in over his head. Taking on Ye was one thing, but now he had another A rank hot on his heels. Ye chimed in dripping with sarcasm, saying that with Qing Tian joining the mix, it felt like a complete smackdown. He casually stretched like he was gearing up for a casual jog, claiming this was the perfect warm-up. Bao was not about to be turned into a training dummy. He thought if he could just grab Yi, he might have a shot. Then Ye unleashed a shadowy realm. He stated that all those flashy moves and unnecessary theatrics wouldn't make up for being stuck at D rank. Ye shot back in surprise, asking who told him he was still a D rank. Before Bao could process it, he got socked in the gut, and the next thing he knew, Ye was behind him, looking like he was debating whether to laugh or roll his eyes. Ye effortlessly blocked his punch, resulting in a small explosion that could have lit up the sky. Bao suddenly realized he had leveled up to B rank. He was scratching his head, trying to figure out how that happened so fast. Ye flashed a grin, giving Bao some props, saying he helped him sharpen his skills little by little. But Bao wasn't obsessed with ranks. He charged at him with confidence that could outshine a lighthouse. He threw an elbow at Ye, but Yi deflected it like a cocky boxer. Qingyan enlightened Yi that in the Shadowland he could whip up energy from the surroundings instead of just using his own. Now that was where the real skill was. Ye got the picture. He quipped that he wasn't used to Qing Tian being such a serious tutor. Bao couldn't help but notice Ye picked up skills faster than a squirrel hopped up on caffeine. He unleashed his power, announcing that Ye better meet his maker, and bombarded him with fireballs. He tried to manipulate the energy around him to gain an edge. Amazingly, he conjured a barrier that Ye admitted this feeling was as addictive as munching on potato chips. He launched a focused attack at Bao, who barely dodged it at the last second. Then Ye fired another shot, while Bao mocked him for his poor aim. Ye corrected him, saying he actually did hit his target, and all that dodging must have scrambled his brain, since the last little gift was just a setup for a nice punch in the face. Bao groaned in agony. He scratched his head, baffled at how this was even happening. The kid kept pulling new skills out of nowhere, and instead of running out of gas, he seemed to be getting stronger. E piped in, asking if that was the best he could manage, showing utter disappointment. He decided it was high time to wrap up this game of tag. Bao was hell-bent on taking him down with him. Ye dove into the shadows, and in a blink he closed the gap and slashed at him. Bao's arm met its pitiful fade eyes, bulging out like a cartoon character as it dropped to the ground. He collapsed to his knees, teeth gritted in fury. Ye then aimed the blade menacingly at the back of his head. Bao dared Ye to finish him off, but Ye smirked, saying that killing him would be letting him off way too easily. Right then, Bao was worth a lot more alive than dead. Quan asked Yi why he wasn't finishing off Bao. He wanted to squeeze more info out of him about Shi. Bao shot back, saying he'd rather face the Grim Reaper than spill the beans. Ye knew this, but Xiao Eng had tricks up his sleeve to make people talk. The moment Xiao Shang's name popped up, Bao was practically on his knees, begging to be released. He even threw out a threat, causing Yi to cover his mouth, like a parent silencing a mischievous child. Then he told him that even if Shi Hai didn't come looking for him, he'd be the one knocking on his door. Qian Qing Tian replied that he could handle the A rank from the NG squad as a favor in return, but Yi wanted to verify first if Ning Dongo was involved before they went into all-out war. Plus, he wanted to settle the score on his own terms. Meanwhile, outside, someone spread the word to hold on tight, as General Hong would be joining them soon. A man chatted with a bald guy he called City Lord, asking if he had any scoop since the troops were moving around like ants on a sugar rush. The City Lord shrugged, saying he had no idea, but something big had to be brewing if the military was involved. Then he turned to Xiaoan, asking if he had any insider info. Right then, Xiao was on a call getting the latest scoop. Sin had been snatched by the Black Panther. Luckily, she was safe, and the troublemaker had been dealt with. This news sent him into a rage. He responded to the earlier question, claiming he had no clue about military matters. He marched over to Dong Hao and warned him that if he couldn't keep his dogs in line, he'd gladly show them some manners. Dong Hao raised an eyebrow, questioning what he really meant. He shot back that he wished he wasn't caught up in this mess. Otherwise, he wouldn't hesitate to take both of them down. An intense tension filled the air as they both radiated energy, trying to intimidate the other. Dong Hao retorted that Xiao Shang was puffing himself up way too much. Xiao Shang challenged him to put his money where his mouth was. Just then, someone strolled in, saying that seeing them all fired up gave him a sense of calm, but reminded them to save their energy for the real battle, especially with Hai Chang on the brink of a huge catastrophe. This man was Hong Hai, the supreme. He walked up to Dong Hao and said if he couldn't control his dogs, he'd gladly teach them a lesson. Dong Hao raised an eyebrow, asking what he was insinuating. He shot back that he wished he could dodge this mess, or else he'd handle both of them at the same time. Energy crackled in the air as they tried to intimidate one another. Dong Hao shot back that Xiao Shang was way overestimating himself. Xiao Shang challenged him to settle it in a duel. Just then, someone walked in, declaring that seeing them all fired up eased his mind, but suggested they chillax for where it really counts, especially with Hai Chang possibly facing a massive disaster. This fiery-haired guy was Hong Hai, to save the juice for the big stuff, especially since Hai Chang might be sitting on a ticking time bomb. This fiery-haired dude was Hong Hai, a supreme military commander of the 3rd Defense Zone under the United Government. They crashed down to tackle a serious topic. Hai nudged his silver-haired sidekick to break it down for the crew. This guy was fully aware that everyone in the room had earned their A rank by taking on those pesky level 2-dimension critters a decade ago. With that little flashback, no one needed a refresher on the mayhem caused by those A rank and S rank monsters from that channel. They're still scratching their noggins over why that level 2 channel made a cameo before disappearing into thin air. But they've been keeping a close eye on all the kooky radiation fluctuations in the meantime. 5 years back, those fluctuations decided to make a comeback tour. The frequency and intensity have been climbing faster than a cat on a hot tin roof, and over the last 3 months, 5 major spikes have been noted almost as bonkers as the ones from a decade ago. The 3 guys were clearly sweating bullets. The City Lord could already connect the dots on why General Hong was gathering them. Hong laid it out that it likely meant Hai Chung was about to witness another level 2 dimensional channel crash the party. Meanwhile, those creepy bipedal critters were inching closer to a portal. He urged them to hightail it back and get geared up. If a level 2 channel bursts forth, High C would be in deep trouble. Though the military had begun their own preparations, he hoped that when the moment arrives, the trio could bury the hatchet and tackle the crisis united. Xiao Shang chirped up that he was all for it as long as certain characters would quit pulling their sneaky little tricks behind his back. Then he shot a side eye at Dong Hao. Hong followed suit, giving Dong Hao a warning glance that they were in a serious pickle, and anyone who dared stir up trouble for personal gain would be facing the consequences. No mercy here. Then he invited Xiao Shang for a ride so they could dish about the latest drama on the road. Dong Hao and the city lord were left staring at each other. The city lord quipped about how Hong doesn't even pretend anymore. It was crystal clear that Xiao Shang was military. And with Xiao Shang getting all riled up over Dong Hao, the city lord guessed it was about the Black Panther gang. He figured it might be wise for Dong Hao to keep a low profile for a spell. Dong Hao was totally in the dark about how he fit into that chaos. The city lord replied that let's cross our fingers, it stays that way. Then he suggested Dong Hao check the news. Back at their office, he was told to keep an eye on the headlines. Shi Hao was on the phone with Dong Hao. Dong Hao mentioned that usually he'd brush off the Black Panther gang's antics, but the news just dropped that the notorious Black Panther gang had made a botch attempt to kidnap the heir of the Chin Group. The hostage was saved, but the leader and his crew were still running for the hills. Dong Hao hoped Shi Hao wasn't tangled up in it. Shi Hao snapped back that he wouldn't lift a finger without his green light. Dong Hao insisted he better get Scene's forgiveness, doesn't matter if it meant crawling on his knees or throwing himself off a cliff. He also wanted him to sever all ties with the Black Panther gang, or he'd be left hanging out to dry. Shi Hao muttered, "Sure thing." But after that chat, he vented his frustration with that darn bow. That afternoon, Sin and Yi popped by a hospital room. Chin was fretting, but Yi calmed her nerves, saying the docs were working their magic. Just then, Shi Hao walked in. He sighed with relief that Chin was doing just fine. He never saw that jerk Bao having the guts to pull a stunt like that. Talk about a death wish. Ye was cautiously curious about why he was there. He asked if Shi Hao meant he had no clue what Bao was up to. Shi Hao confidently replied yes, claiming he was strictly business with them. But he made sure to reassure them that from that day forward, the NG group would cut ties with them and even help track down any stragglers from the gang. But Ye was still raising an eyebrow. He shot back, asking if that meant they were going for a fresh start or just throwing a pawn under the bus to save the king. Shi Hao warned him to knock it off. He mentioned the stuff he snagged from the Black Panther could keep him cozy for life. He asked Ye if he really wanted to take him on. Ye shot back that those things were just leftovers. The principle he wanted to collect was his life. Shi Hao turned to Sang and asked if her family felt the same. She flashed a grin and told him to take a wild guess. He simply replied that they had nothing more to discuss. He cautioned them that he was part of the NG group, and without any hard evidence, they couldn't lay a finger on him. Ye fired back that he better hope Bao and his crew never show their faces again, or else he'd be living in a real-life horror movie. After that, he called a researcher and ordered them to pump the remaining Black Panther gang goons with God's blood. They were in a lab where the patients were strapped to beds while the doctors examined them. But after the call, the doctors prepped the injection. One patient screamed in terror, insisting that they were with the Black Panther gang, but the doctor didn't blink an eye and jabbed the drug in a flash. The patient's eyes bulged and his veins started to swell. The poor guy groaned in agony. His wild writhing managed to free him from the straps. They all went bananas in sheer madness. At that moment, they looked like they crawled out of a zombie horror flick. Then Xiao's phone buzzed. He couldn't wait for the headlines tomorrow. He was expecting something like arrogant teen faces, vicious revenge, after messing with the Black Panther gang, or perhaps Black Panther gang gets a surprise after dealing with mysterious drugs. While in the car, vicious revenge could be on the way for the Black Panther gang, or maybe Black Panther gang members lose their minds after outrageous drug abuse. While in the car, Xiaoang grilled General Hong about why he was in such a mad rush to see Ye. Hong retorted that in just a little over a month, he'd zoomed from being a total nobody to someone who could actually throw down with B-rank heavyweights. Plus, he had offloaded a mountain of snazzy weapons to Xiao Shang. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow flitting outside their ride. Turns out, he wasn't the only one eager to catch up with Ye. Xiao Shan took a gander at the goods for the weapons he handed over, and they seemed like they were just trying to wear a mask of impressiveness. General Hong winked and suggested they let the weapons strut their stuff in a real brawl. That got his attention, and Hong couldn't help but jab that he was getting a bit soft and wasn't as quick on the draw as in his youth. Meanwhile, outside Ye was waiting for them, greeting them with a warm, "What brings you to my not-so-humble dwelling?" General Hong couldn't help but chuckle that Ye recognized him, replying that he was a pretty big deal. And not-so-humble abode. General Hong was tickled pink that Ye recognized him, quipping that he was quite the big deal, and if Ye didn't know him, he'd need at least 9 lives to make up for it. They found themselves standing there awkwardly, leading General Hong to ask if Ye was going to invite them in or just let them freeze. Ye said he'd love to, but they sure picked a downright inconvenient time for a drop-in. Hong reassured him that someone would handle their little hiccup. Ye scratched his head, utterly puzzled by all the riddle speak. With no other option, he reluctantly invited them inside. The military was buzzing around, setting up a live feed. Ye sheepishly confessed he didn't sense any heavy hitters nearby, so he asked if they planned to let the regular soldiers do the fighting. General Hong nodded, eager to see those everyday folks get their chance to shine. He was impressed by Ye's chill vibe and the fact he wasn't bombarding them with reckless questions, but deep down, Ye thought Hong might be a bit out there or was treating soldiers like they were disposable, though he definitely didn't look like he was bluffing at all. General Hong gave the thumbs up to kick things off, and the attack squad along with the drone defense took their stances. They watched the screen, and Ye recognized those guys on screen as members of the Black Panther gang, the same folks whose bones he had turned into a glittering confetti before. He was curious how those guys healed up so fast. Something felt fishy about them. Chinchin studied their condition and couldn't believe what he was suspecting. The soldiers charged in open fire. Apparently, they missed one dude chilling in a tree who was cooking up a storm of lightning in his hand and sent it zipping into the sky. The soldiers kicked into gear with their drone defense system. A swarm of drones zipped up, forming layers of barriers that eventually created a giant shield to protect them from the impending lightning strike. After that, the soldiers retaliated, aiming at the charging guy while keeping their formation as they pushed forward. Ye observed the drone defense shields capable of injuring Shionk advanced and began to wonder if that swanky gear came from the materials he had supplied. Xiaoan turned to General Hong, confirming if that was his brilliant handiwork. Hong nodded enthusiastically, declaring that with a little more material, they could flip the script on the current order. Ye had to admit those soldiers were pretty impressive, but then one of his windows went kaboom. He figured one guy had managed to sneak by. General Hong quickly clarified that it wasn't a case of someone slipping through the cracks. He had purposefully let that guy go for Ye's amusement. In response, Ye conjured a serpent blade and sliced through the sharp rocks heading his way, realizing General Hong wanted to see what he was really capable of. Then a zombie-like dude from the Black Panther gang jumped in, hollering for him to meet his doom. The bad guy whipped up a massive pointed rock and hurled it at Ye. Ye felt a tad sorry for Sane's villa as the tip of the rock clanked against his blade, smashing the rock into tiny pieces. Next, he zoomed in on the fellow. General Hong assessed that Ye's power level had to be B rank, maybe even on the brink of A rank. Xiao Shang shrugged, suggesting Hong might just be puffing up the story. Not convinced at all, General Hong urged him to simply sit back and watch, predicting that the kid wasn't even breaking a sweat yet. The bad guy switched on a petrification shield. Ye shoved him to the ground, puzzled at how this guy had escalated to B-rank status. He joked if these guys were on performance-enhancing drugs, but the dude was all about trying to end him. Ye sensed this guy was completely off his rocker. Then the guy levitated more rocks into the air, announcing he was no longer human. His entire body morphed into stone. Ye knew it was time to send him packing. He figured it would be smart to keep his own strength under wraps in front of those seasoned pros. A simple Tier 1 move would do the trick. He sliced the rocks into confetti. With the opponent out of the picture, the two gents stepped forward. General Hong admitted he originally thought the reports about Ye were stretching the truth, but after witnessing his action, he realized they had totally underestimated his prowess. Ye boldly pointed out that he was aware General Hong wasn't dropping by at night just to swap stories about tidying up a few minor kinks. General Hong confessed that the gear those soldiers were sporting came from that magnificent sword he had gifted. He was hoping to chat about securing more weapons or materials. Since the military was already transforming those materials into combat gear, he expected they'd be able to replicate those same materials. General Hong sighed, admitting the snag was they were running out of time. He couldn't spill all the beans, but a level 2-dimensional channel could pop up near Hai Chen at any minute, and judging by the current strength of Hai Chen's military and its capabilities, they might find themselves in way over their heads. Hearing about the level 2-dimensional channel sparked Qing Tian's fury. General Hong gave his shoulder a supportive pat, saying if they wanted to keep civilians safe, their only shot was that they had enough gear to suit up their troops. He insisted he'd figure out how to snag those weapons, promising a solution would drop within 3 days, give or take a coffee refill. But he made it crystal clear that he couldn't guarantee how much he could actually round up. General Hong chirped that he'd sweeten the deal, but cash wasn't on the table. Instead, he dangled a juicy military position in front of him. Then, to spice things up, he threw in the idea of becoming the Qin family's son-in-law and running the whole Qin circus. That idea hit the floor faster than a hot potato, and Xiao Shang caught wind of it, fuming like a pressure cooker about to blow. They brushed past his objections, and Yi told General Hong to forget the dough, since assisting Hai Chen was part of the job description anyway. General Hong asked one more time if he was totally sure about not wanting to join the Qin family as a son-in-law. Yi, ever polite, said he'd handle his own affair. He couldn't wrap his head around how those folks opened up a level 2 channel faster than a kid on a sugar rush. Ye popped up and asked what had him freaking out earlier. Shinty went as quiet as a mime at a carnival. Then he explained that a level 2 channel was no playground for a lowly B rank like Ye. He warned him to steer clear if he valued his life. Ye started prying about what was lurking in the level 2 channel and the fear it stirred up. He spilled. Just then, General Hong strolled in with Xiaoang, directing him to leave Black Panther and the bodies for the military and to keep his nose out of it. Xiao Shang raised an eyebrow for clarification. Hong then dropped the bombshell that he'd read in the file about a mining accident involving Ye's parents that should have cost the NG group a fistful of cash. He was scratching his head, wondering why they'd go to such lengths to hush up witnesses. Then, as if the plot needed more twists, those assassins earlier looked like they were tripping on some mind-bending drugs, showing the NG group was knee-deep in trouble. With Dinghe in the mix, Hong knew it'd be a circus for Xiaoang, so it made more sense to let the military clean up the mess. Plus, he was hoping to score Yi a favor from the military. Meanwhile, high up in the tower that scraped the sky, Ye asked Qing Tian if leveling up his strength after tackling the 3rd level trial was a real thing. Qing Tian shrugged that breaking through to A rank was a tough nut to crack. The 3rd level trial wouldn't magically bump Yi to A rank, but Shintan told him that if he was looking to use the gear to help humanity, he might just hit the motherlode with an endless supply. That got Yi pumped up to dive headfirst into the 3rd level trial without a second thought. But Shintan hit the brakes, sensing something was off. He claimed he had some news to share, and only after that could Yi decide if he still wanted to jump into the 3rd level trial. As he had mentioned before, the whole alternate dimension was more like a colossal prison than Yi's world. It had 3 layers from the outside in. The outer layer was home to B rank and lower scoundrels. That's where Yi's portal linked up. The middle layer was the hangout where the A and S rank criminals partied. That's where the level 2 channels tied in. And the inner layer, it was the big leagues of high-ranking convicts guys whose ranks stretched beyond regular human classifications. They were called warlords, gatelords, and monarchs. The mission of his baddie clan was to guard the gate. Ye asked why those alternate dimension channels popped up in the first place. Qing explained it was because of a traitor in their clan. This traitor teamed up with the top-tier convicts from the inner layer and stirred up a riot trying to grab control of the gate to the other world in a desperate escape plan from their miserable prison. Realizing the chaos couldn't be stopped, Qing Tian's only move was to lock down the gate to the other world and sit tight until reinforcements arrived. He didn't foresee millions of years slipping by with no backup on the way. His energy began to dwindle, making it tougher to maintain the seal. Then, a decade ago, the outer gate to the other world caved in, and those alternate dimension channels became a reality. Ye asked how this tied into him taking the 3rd level trial. Ching replied it was because once he wrapped up the trial, he'd be stamped with the one and only mark of the Entropic clan. That would make him the sworn enemy of every creature in the other world, with them all having him in their sights. Ye finally grasped Ching's concern. Basically, after the level 2 channel swings open, if he didn't have the Entropic clan's soul imprint, he could just kick back and enjoy the show, while those monsters hunted everything in sight. He could retreat to a corner and watch Hai Chang turn into a crispy critter, but despite that, he still wanted to take a swing at the third layer. He wasn't exactly a saint, but he sure wasn't one to hide and wait for death. So even if the enemy had the upper hand, he'd rather go down fighting. Ching chuckled to himself, calling him a cheeky little B-rank kid. He decided to go along with his plans. Ye joked that this felt like the real Ching. Being serious was like putting a tuxedo on a monkey. He even nudged him to repeat that compliment, but Chin waved it off, saying he must be hearing things. Then Ye stepped through the portal. Chin welcomed him at the 3rd level, at the very heart of the tower. He'll get branded with the one and only emblem of the Entropic clan. This means he'll become the sworn enemy of every creature in that otherworldly realm, and they'll all be gunning for him. So you finally grasped what Ching is fretting about. Basically, once that level 2 channel swings wide, if he doesn't have the Entropic clan's soul imprint, he can just chill back and enjoy the chaos while everything that pops out goes on a hunt. He could just hunker down and watch Hai Chang turn into ashes. But guess what? He still wants to leap to the 3rd layer. He knows he's not some divine being, but he's also no chicken waiting for doom. So even if the bad guys are stronger, he'd rather face them straight on, even if it means meeting his maker. Ching found that pretty funny and called him a sassy little B-rank punk. He decided to roll with the punches. Ye remarked that it's just so much more fitting for him. Being serious is like putting a tuxedo on a monkey. He even teased him to say it again, but Chin brushed it off. He claimed he must be hearing things. Then Ye stepped out of the portal, and Chin welcomed him at the 3rd level, the epicenter of the towering structure, also known as the Sea of Souls. I must be hearing things. Then Ye stepped out of the portal, and Chin greeted him on the 3rd level, the epicenter of the towering sky pole, famously known as the Sea of Souls. The soul fragments of the Entropic clan's warriors who kicked the bucket over millions of years were all just hanging out there. You've got to sweet-talk these spirits to take full control of the Chintian Tower. It's gonna be a real edge-of-your-seat affair. But this one-time baptism was his golden ticket to snagging himself a 2nd shadow skill. He was absolutely buzzing with curiosity over what kind of superpower it would be. It was something that came to life after his soul went through some serious buffing. Everyone wakes up to something different. Chin was lucky enough to score a shadow clone. He could split into a whole squad of clones ready to jump into action, even if the main guy got toasted as long as one clone was still standing. His consciousness would stick around like that annoying gum on the sidewalk. Ye was curious about what happened to his main body. He was totally clueless about its fate. It might still be roaming the earth or turn to dust. He nudged Chin to hop on in. He was itching to see what Ye would end up with. Yi promised he wouldn't let him down. Chingatan thought about how this little B-rank guy hadn't disappointed him yet. He could totally see him unlocking a completely unique ability compared to the rest of them. Ye kept on strolling. He came across a body of water with shiny soul fragments floating around. He reached out to snag one of those soul pieces. It shattered in his hand, and he felt all sorts of weird. He caught glimpses of the Entropic clan throwing down in some epic battles. One of them yelled that even if no one remembers them, they had to guard the entrance to the other world. Then another brave Entropic warrior declared that he might be the smallest fry, but he wasn't a scaredy cat. None of them flinched at the thought of death. They were dead set on holding the fort against anyone who dared to intrude. Ye screamed because his head felt like it was about to explode. He witnessed the Entropic clan's battle, a conflict no one outside even knew about. He watched them fade away like dust in the wind. They glanced around and saw themselves disappearing, with someone who looked just like him, telling him to take a good hard look. This doppelganger asked him which of the fallen wasn't at least 100 times stronger than him. Then he got told that a puny B-rank like him didn't have what it takes to join the big leagues. He shouldn't have bothered getting mixed up in this mess. But Ye didn't give a hoot about being a B-rank. He had people he wanted to protect. He had beliefs worth fighting for. He was told he was being foolish. He fired back at his doppelganger to laugh all he wanted. Ye was dead set that even if the enemy had thousands upon thousands more muscle than him, he wouldn't bail and would fight till the bitter end, even if his pathetic power could only make a tiny splash in the massive ocean. A little while later, Qingchen felt a wild wave of emotions rushing in. He started to worry about Ye. Back to our hero's confrontation, his doppelganger told him he was giving himself way too much credit. Ye tried to roll with the punches like a champ. He sidestepped to dodge the hit. He steadied himself. His doppelganger sneered, claiming that his strength was rooted in Ye's fears, so there was no way he could hold his ground, especially armed with nothing but his flimsy ideals. Ye shot back that it wasn't just him. He could feel every soul sharing his feelings. He knew those souls would gladly lay down their lives to uphold what they believed in. He pushed back and managed to land a hit on the doppelganger's fist. He declared that those souls were the real deal, but his doppelganger was just his inner demon. He squashed the doppelganger, proclaiming he was just a fleeting thought passing through his mind. After that, the souls of the Entropic clan appeared and granted him a second skill, Soul Protection. It was like hitting the jackpot for him. Soul Protection was a commander skill that boosted the combat and defense abilities of all his followers. Ye got access to the Skyreaching Tower's stash of medicines and weapons. Qingchen rolled in and exclaimed that this B rank had him totally blown away. A door popped up and Ye asked what was going on. It was the secret entrance to the Entropic clan's armory and medical stash. Ye decided to delve into what treasures were tucked away in there. He wondered just how much treasure was hidden. Qingchen shot back that the weapons and healing potions in those glowing zones could gear up a war with hundreds of thousands of soldiers. As for the ore he needed to forge weapons, he could consider everything in there as primo raw material. Ye felt like he had hit the jackpot. He wondered if the 3 remaining levels had even more sweet loot. Qingchen replied no and clarified that the 4th and 5th levels were knockoff simulations of the Otherworld prison's 2nd and 3rd layers meant to help Yi get his combat on. He asked what was lurking in the 6th level. Qian told him he wasn't quite ready for that intel yet and secretly hoped he'd never get the chance to open it. Qing caught wind of Yi's serious thoughts about him once again. Ye teased him that it wasn't about being unqualified. It was just that Qingchen ran out of cash before making it to the 6th level. That made perfect sense since the 4th and 5th levels didn't even dish out rewards, so the 6th was probably just a barren wasteland. Qian did his best to keep cool. Meanwhile, a researcher notified Shihao that the military had whisked away those injected with God's blood. Shihao wondered when Ye got chummy with the military. They also caught wind that B was being held in a top-secret military prison. Shihao was shocked by the news because he thought Bao was a goner. This rattled him because that guy knew way too much so he could easily spill the beans. He ordered them to start charging up the level 2 channel ASAP. The researcher got anxious since the surrounding area hadn't been cleared out, but Shiha didn't give a hoot about the lives of those peasants. The countdown began and they flipped the switch. Suddenly, he started to fret since they hadn't cleared the area yet, but Shiha couldn't care less about the lives of those little peasants. The countdown kicked off and they pressed the big red button. All of a sudden, the folks on the other side looked like they'd seen a ghost when this wacky barrier popped up out of nowhere. Then, bam! They caught wind of some mysterious radiation. They thought, hey, let's take a gander. Meanwhile, everyone else was told to steer clear like it was a skunk wearing cologne. Everyone was begging to be rescued, like they were on the last lifeboat of the Titanic. The workers bolted like their lives depended on it. Spoiler alert, they absolutely did. In that light barrier, it was spreading faster than gossip at a family reunion, so they kicked it into high gear. Shiha got the scoop from one of the brainiacs that the radiation leak from level 2 had already stretched out 10 kilometers. But hey, at least it was still under control, kind of like a toddler on a candy high, right? He told them to cut off all communications and seal up the entrance to this freaky alternate dimension. No way they could let that juicy info slip through the cracks, but the entrance was just 60 kilometers away. At this rate, radiation would start leaking out in 36 hours. And once that kicked in, boy, it'd be like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for nosy neighbors. He asked how long until the level 2 channel was wide open. The researchers shot back that it'd take 48 hours. So all they had to do was keep everyone juggling flaming swords for the next 48 hours. He ordered the release of their swarm hanging out at the NG Group's 3 mining sectors. He figured Dingo was onto something, so why not make him the main act in his own horror flick? That night at the military base, General Hong asked Ye how much ore he had bagged. Ye answered with around 600 tons, and you could practically see the general's face light up like he found a 20 tucked away in his old jeans. He handed Ye a document containing Bao's testimony. It was a jaw-dropper. It confirmed that Ye's parents didn't just meet their end in some mining accident. Nope, Shi Hao had hired the Black Panthers gang to silence them about something wild. Ye was fuming. What are they trying to bury? He huffed. General Hong told him it still needed some digging, as they hadn't connected all the dots yet. Ye shot back. What does that mean? Are we just letting Shi Hao roam free? General Hong clarified that Shi Hao had disappeared like a magician's rabbit, and the others tangled up with the Black Panthers had also pulled a Houdini. Besides, Ye wasn't part of the military elite, so there was a mountain of classified info he couldn't even sniff at. Ye asked if Dong Hao was in the loop. General Hong said their investigation results were still a toss-up. If Dong Hao was involved, what was the plan? Was he going to take him out? Even with Ye's skills, his current drama would bring enough trouble to fill an entire podcast. Ye asked if he had any ideas. Hong said a man's rank dictates his playbook, kind of like being cool enough to join the popular kids' table. With military backing, even someone like Dong Hao could be taken out without a hitch. Ye smirked, realizing General Hong had bigger fish to fry than just signing him up for boot camp. General Hong countered, saying Ye was overthinking things, that joining the military would make them all like family. If Ye had valuable resources like Lior, it was only fair he got compensated whenever the military came knocking. Just then, the earpiece of General Hong's aide beeped like a blaring alarm clock on a Monday morning. He got a message from the detection team. With no outsiders in sight, Hong told them to stream the video feed through. He learned there were multiple insectoid swarm attacks popping off all over Haicheng, and the soldier highlighted the hotspots on the map. His jaw dropped when Longmen Hospital showed up. That's where Duano was. He had to alert Sin and the gang to get the heck out like yesterday. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Sin was by Ao's bedside when her phone buzzed. She answered Ye's call and asked what was the scoop. Little did she know an insect creature was creeping right outside the window, like a surprise party gone horribly wrong. Yi shouted at her to get Ao out like right now. But guess what? It was too late. The insect monster crashed through the wall like it was made of cardboard. Sin's guard warned her heads up. He intercepted the beast with a sword and yelled at her to run with Owl while he held the creepy critter off. She helped Owl stand up, and as they scrambled out, she reminded her guard to be careful, but the corridor was straight-up chaos. An insect monster was running wild, and the patients and staff were hustling like it was the end of the world. Sin wondered what in the world insects were doing in the hospital. Owl urged her to take off and not worry about him. Sin couldn't believe he'd say that there was no way she'd ditch him. Meanwhile, an insectoid had snuck up behind them, and bam, its front limb slashed her. She got shoved back, and Owl tumbled down too. He urged her to flee, but she hurled a piece of wood at the insectoid like it was her last shot at survival. She wasn't trained for battle, but she wasn't just any slouch. She was an advanced B rank. She charged at it, plank in hand, refusing to bail on Owl, but the insectoid snapped her wood like a toothpick and slammed her against the wall. Owl's anxiety hit the roof for her safety. On the flip side, Ye was racing toward her, sensing trouble brewing, but totally clueless about what was really going down. He felt the urge to try out a new skill. He had Soul Protection, a snazzy command move that would amp up the combat and defense of his crew. He tuned into Sin's vibe. He called out for her to get back on her feet and cheered her on, asking if she believed in him. She replied yes, and boom, Soul Protection activated. Her defense and attack shot up like she'd just munched on a power-up mushroom. He told her to stand tall and encouraged her that she had this. He asked if she trusted him, and she confidently said yes. Boom! She got Soul Protection. Her defense and attack levels skyrocketed. He told her to show those bedbugs who's the boss. That gave her some serious confidence. She whipped out her Soul Protection and yanked that creepy critter's arm like it was a rag doll, sending it crashing to the ground. The earth went asterisk, boom asterisk beneath them, and they were both falling. She was completely stunned that she actually pulled that off. Yi swooped in to catch her midair like some kind of superhero. He complimented her skills, saying she was pretty amazing. A wave of relief washed over her when she saw him. Then, of course, he couldn't resist teasing her about crying after dispatching the creepy crawlies. She admitted she thought she was headed to the pearly gates and might never see him again. He laughed it off and promised her that was never going to happen because he was always going to have her 6. They were still wrapped up in a cozy hug when someone butted in. It was Ao hanging there like a piñata caught in rebar. He asked if they could get him down before the sapfest got too intense. They both turned bright red, looking like ripe tomatoes. At long last, they made a grand escape from the hospital. Sen slammed down the potion, and wow, it took effect faster than a cheetah on roller skates when it came to healing their wounds. Out of the blue, a serious-looking dude approached them. He recognized Ye as a top hero and asked him to rescue their medical team. Apparently, they were stuck in the alternate dimension mine of Sector 7, a true sitcom of trouble. The place was crawling with insectoids like it was straight out of a low-budget horror flick. Those mining zones were supposed to be cleaner than a germaphobe's dream bathroom. Shenna asked how on earth the insectoids had gotten in there. Yi was already piecing the puzzle together. He figured that since the Sector 7 mine belonged to the NG group and was close to the hospital, that's probably where the little critters sprang from. Enan nodded, thinking he might just be onto something. They wasted no time hurrying over there to see what the NG crew was up to. As they got closer, the mine was crumbling apart like a poorly made sandwich. They were shouting at everyone to clear the area and not linger near the entrance. The guards set up a wall to keep the worried folks from rushing in, convinced the only threat was those insectoids. But those folks weren't buying it. They kept saying that if they weren't allowed in, their family members would be in big trouble. They wouldn't believe the collapse was just due to some creepy-crawly mischief. They pleaded to be let inside. The guy on the megaphone was fed up and scolded them for spreading rumors, insisting that the mine was falling apart for reasons other than insect invaders. One guy in the crowd tossed out that his brother sent a video proving there were definitely insectoids in the mine. They were baffled as to why they couldn't see it for themselves. Sure, it was risky, but they felt justified in trying to make a rescue. Everyone in the crowd nodded in agreement, insisting that waiting would only make things worse for their people. The mine rep decided to start arresting the troublemakers. Just then, someone stepped up and pointed out that the NG group was throwing its weight around. The man challenged, asking who had the guts to confront the NG group. Can strutted up and asked if they were just going to stand there or if she needed to give them a kick in the pants. The man looked down at her like she was an ant for thinking she could challenge them. It was their turf after all. He suggested she was getting a bit too feisty. She shot back that she had people from Longmen 3rd Street trapped in there, so trying to save them was basically a no-brainer. They warned her that if she tried to bulldoze her way in, she shouldn't be surprised when nobody from Longmen 3rd Street got any respect. Out of nowhere, Yed disappeared. When he reappeared, he was behind the guy with a sword practically grazing his neck. He told the dude that squeezing their way in wasn't a big deal, so maybe they should just let them through. The guy asked who he thought he was. Ye warned him not to get too rowdy. He just happened to be the vice president of the NG group after all. Ye casually replied that he was just an E-rank nobody with no connections, but was definitely not scared of the NG group, which only made the VP's blood boil. Suddenly, a glowing projectile shot towards Ye, and bam! It knocked him sideways toward the cliff, but thankfully, he used his arms to shield himself. The attack came from Dong Hao, who came rolling up asking what the ruckus was about. The NG vice president filled him in, claiming Sin had dragged people in to spread rumors about insectoids while trying to break into the mine. Dong Hao demanded a proper explanation from Chin. She told him about their medical crew stuck inside. Apparently, the place was crawling with insectoids. Dong Hao proudly boasted that it took his NG crew 3 years to evict all those bugs before they even got their mitts on the mining permit from the city lord. CI kept quiet. Out of respect for Xiao, he decided he'd let it slide this time. Ye couldn't help but challenge Dong Hao, asking if he really let his goons pull the wool over his eyes, or if he just didn't care about the average Joe's well-being. He cranked up the gravity on his feet and told Dong Hao it was about time he quit lecturing him. Ye suggested Dong Hao go check it out himself. The mine was practically behind him. Ye activated Shadow Enhancement Tier 2 to endure the gravity beatdown. Dong Hao shot back he wouldn't waste his time validating such wild stories. After all, he was an A-rank human who could mess around with gravity and had the iron body skill making him as tough as a steel beam. Ching Chin asked Yi if he needed backup, but Yi shrugged it off, assuring him that Dong Hao was about to be schooled. Suddenly, there was a massive commotion at the mine entrance. Dong Hao wondered what on earth that ruckus was. Insectoids crawled out of the mine like it was a Saturday night special. Without missing a beat, Dong Hao jumped into action with his gravity manipulation to take down the insectoid. Ye pointed out that verifying anything was pointless since the bugs had already shown up. You wouldn't believe it. The crowd went totally bonkers. They whipped out their phones to record the madness. The vice president shouted for them to settle down and stop filming, but it was like trying to bottle a tornado. He used his gravity powers to squish the insectoid flat. Ye pointed out that there was no need to check things out since the insectoid had already made its entrance. No response from him. The insectoid's grand entrance sent the audience into a frenzy. They started recording to make sure everyone got the scoop. The vice president yelled for them to hold still and capture that footage, but no one was listening. They were too hyped up. They were in a bind trying to save someone dear to them. Ye gave Dong Hao a gentle nudge, asking if he still planned to keep them on the sidelines for the rescue mission. Dong Hao strolled towards the crowd like he owned the place, while the vice president piped up, reminding him that outsiders weren't exactly given a warm welcome here. He shot back that he'd handle that later, once he put this little mess to bed. Instead of giving the crowd a hand, he chewed out the guards for blocking their way instead of charging in and smashing some bug butts. Cien was a bundle of nerves about Ye after that earlier scare, but he assured her he was as good as gold. He told them to hold tight while he went off to rescue the medics. She urged him to be careful, and off they went. The vice president did a double take, flabbergasted by how many insectoids had popped up when there were barely a dozen before. He was sweating like a popsicle in the sun, worrying about being completely outnumbered by those creepy crawlies. Donga yelled at him to rally the troops for some backup. Ye popped his head up, suggesting it was time to stop twiddling their thumbs and do something rather than wait for reinforcements. The longer they lingered, the slimmer their odds of making it out alive got. The vice president argued furiously that the president's well-being was way too important, and if he got hurt, it'd be game over for all of them. Ye couldn't help but jab at Dong Hao, poking fun at how soft he'd gotten after living the cushy life for so long. Then he gave him a quick once-over, checking if he was good to jump in and be the hero. Since Ye was just a C rank, it felt like he was trying out for the part of Bug Chow. Ye dared him to gather his crew and follow him, eager for a front-row seat to see who was going to bite the dust. Ye kicked it into high gear with a shadow jaunt. He zipped through the insectoids, slicing them like they were made of butter, and poof, several were just gone like magic. Ching pointed out that something seemed off about those bugs. Ye noticed it too when he turned on the shadow eye. He could definitely tell these insectoids were cut from a different cloth than the ones he'd dealt with before. Activating Shadow Morph, he forged a cool sword. With a mighty swing, he sent a bunch of insectoids packing. He couldn't wrap his head around how these little monsters had managed to stay beneath the radar in a mine for so long. Ching Tian chimed in, explaining that these insectoids had just hatched that very day. Ye gasped, how was that even possible? The insectoid reproduction rate was absolutely bonkers, and he'd never heard of them popping out at C rank before. Ching Tian revealed that it could happen if someone was using God's blood. This left Ye scratching his head. What even was that? Recently, Ye had snagged a B-rank sporting skills like Shadow Knowledge Base, Shadow Morph, Ultimate Shadow Eye, Shadow Enhancement Tier 3, B+ Body Enhancement Shadow Jaunt, and Shadow Domain. According to Ching Chin, God's blood was a nasty toxin that could crank up the combat strength of any living being. Sadly, it also sent the user into a furious frenzy until they dropped dead from sheer exhaustion. Ching Chin guessed there was a mother bug lurking nearby riddled with the stuff. He'd seen it before. Sometimes, he decided to tackle that puzzle later since saving peeps was top priority. Meanwhile, inside the cave, people were all huddled up together. The injured had somehow managed to get their hands on some first aid, but they were freaking out, convinced the bugs had located them. They started to wonder if anyone would actually come to save them. One of the injured wailed that he didn't want to kick the bucket. The medic urged him to hang on, claiming help would definitely arrive. Suddenly, a bug crashed in, and bam, there was Ye. He had finally found them. The crowd erupted in cheers, thankful they had help at last. Flanking Ye were Dong Hao and the vice president. Dong Hao, still skeptical of Ye being a mere C rank, was blown away watching him take down the insectoids. He was making it look too easy, and his energy levels were still through the roof. Maybe he was really a B rank, or even an... Just then, someone swooped in to save the day. Ye was flanked by Dong Hao and the vice president. Dong Hao, still in disbelief, thought there's no way that kid was just a C rank after tossing those insectoids around like confetti. He tackled a bunch of them solo, and his energy seemed on point. Dong Hao began to suspect he might be a B rank or maybe even an A rank just like him. Qin Tan signaled to Yi that something's definitely brewing at the iron door on the left. The vice president caught him heading that way and bellowed why he was doing that. He yelled at the kid to scram since that door led to their special storeroom packed with important stuff. Ye was sensing the mother bug's presence inside. The vice president stormed over hollering for him to keep his mitts off. He warned that if Ye broke anything, he'd be in deep trouble. Ye raised an intrigued eyebrow, questioning these important items. He wondered when the NG group had started experimenting with insectoids. The vice president snapped back, telling him to quit spinning wild conspiracy theories. Ye challenged him to unlock the door and see for himself. Dong Hao ordered him to open it. The vice president's face was priceless. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. He repeated his insistence to open it alongside a weak excuse that only the supervisor had the key and they couldn't get a hold of them. Ye smirked, thinking he had a better plan. He took the fast track and sliced the door to shreds. As soon as he laid eyes on the important items, his expression morphed into pure fury. The people inside all lifeless. It looked like the life had been completely drained from them. Ye's thoughts raced, wondering if this was how his parents had met the same fate, and his uncle too. He aimed his blade at Dong Hao and demanded to know, were the lives of the miners really viewed as worthless by the NG group? Furiously, steam rolled off him as he shouted at Dong Hao to spill the beans. The folks with him spotted the tags on the bodies. It was Old Wong, but they remembered hearing he'd met his end in a mining collapse 2 years prior. They recognized Old Zhang and Old Wu as Ye laid it out for him plainly. It was as clear as day someone had been using those miners as snacks for the mother bug. Dong Hao pressed the vice president, wanting the real scoop on what was happening. The vice president stammered that he'd only done it for the NG group's own good. He echoed that 3 years ago they had finally gotten their hands on the mine, but President jumped in, explaining he was simply doing this for the good of the NG group. He went into a tale about how 3 years ago they finally snagged the mine, but I never imagined we'd stumble upon a mama bug chilling down in the mines, just trying to keep the mining operation running without a hitch. Ye popped in, claiming they were basically serving people up as snacks for that creepy crawly. The vice president was so freaked out he squealed like a piglet when Dong Hao came near. Dong Hao turned to Yi and said this was a family affair, and he really shouldn't be nosing in. Ye pointed out that if not thousands, at least hundreds of miners had met their doom down there, and this guy still wanted to play defense for his vice president. The guards were grappling to keep the furious mob from getting their hands on Dong Hao. The crowd was steaming mad, yelling at him like he was a murderer. They demanded that those at fault face the music. They were all about justice, even suggesting some pretty hefty punishments, like a seat in the electric chair. Dong Hao was fuming. The vice president whined to the guards, complaining that they were on the payroll just to stand around. He ordered them to clear the miners out of the way. He then laid it out for the president that he was in a tough spot. Qian wanted to handle that slime himself. Ye told him he didn't need to jump in. It was the perfect opportunity for some bug-driven justice, to experience being on the menu for those bedbugs. Dong Hao watched him slip away, while the vice president kept babbling about how even if that mother bug was just B rank, it could lose its marbles and reproduce faster than rabbits in a love fest if it felt threatened. Just picture it. The mine could shut down and they'd be staring at losses bigger than a black hole if that happened. Dong Hao balled his fists ready to rumble. He told the vice president he was only worried about keeping his cushy spot in the organization. Just as he was about to throw a punch, kaboom! An explosion went off behind them. The mother bug made its grand entrance. The vice president freaked out and started running for his life, jumping right on to the mother bug's dinner menu. The bug snagged him, and he was begging the president for mercy. Dong Hao shrugged, saying he was more trouble than he was worth, and figured he could bid him goodbye along with the beast. When the dust settled, the bug vanished into a hole deeper than my last Friday night escapade. Yi popped out of the inner cave, casually asking how that mother bug managed to pull off such a grand exit. Dong Hao was livid. With a smirk, Ye remarked that it was great the president was still in one piece. If not, it would have been quite the pickle. Dong Hao called out Yi for launching that mother bug into the stratosphere. He claimed he was just doing Dong Hao a favor by tidying up the pest issue. But boy, he never expected the NG group would have such rebellious minions and even bedbugs that refused to play by the rules. Dong Hao shouted his name. Yi cheekily asked if he was itching for a fight, suggesting he save his energy, since the media was already on top of this whole mess. He nudged Dong Hao to start brainstorming how he'd cover this one up. Dong Hao swore he'd make Yi pay for this sooner or later. Yi simply declared he'd be ready for that showdown. I flopped onto my bed, tuning into the chaos and mayhem stirred up by the NG group's minds. An order was thrown out to shut down all alternate dimension portals under their name and round up the culprits. Yeah, I felt let down, realizing the NG group's game plan. A half-hearted apology tossed some cash around and then sweep it all under the rug like a bad carpet stain. He remembered that Qinjian hadn't spilled the tea on God's blood yet. Qinjian explained that God's blood only exists in the taboo territories of the Blood Clan, which is way down in the third layer. Logically, it shouldn't even be dipping its toes in that area. Ye asked why he'd never heard of the Blood Clan before. Turns out the weakest ones were S rank. That's why they were all stuck in a swanky little prison in the innermost layer. To Ye, it sounded like their baby was already rocking in S rank. King explained that the Blood Clan wasn't a single race. It was just a catch-all term for creatures that had successfully fused with God's blood. Not every little critter that took the blood bit the dust. Some lucky ones thrived and joined the Blood Clan. And since God's blood set loose their hidden potential, the survivors were at least S rank. Ye thought maybe one of those Blood Clan folks had pulled off a daring escape from the third layer. He responded that sounded ridiculous. If that happened, Ye's world would have crumbled ages ago. Right then, Qian opened a portal. Yi asked him where he was headed. Qian said he was off since Yi's romantic interest was waiting for him, and he didn't want to be that guy overstaying his welcome. Ye was confused about what he meant by that. He peeked out the window and saw Cannon had arrived, all smiles, announcing she'd be moving in with him. He protested that might not be the brightest idea since her dad would probably go completely berserk on him. Cien brushed that off, saying she was mad at him for knowing how to unlock new skills but keeping it a secret to hold her back. Ye pointed out that she was already a powerhouse. Her B rank upgrade was all the proof he needed, plus she had taken down that pesky D rank insect the other day. She told him to quit it. She was fully aware he had juiced her up with something special that day. Even so, without solid combat skills, she was just slightly above average. So she was set on getting stronger, not just be a dead weight for him. He called her name and patted her head, gazing deep into her eyes as he insisted she'd never be a burden. It was downright hilarious watching her dad lurking behind the couch, muttering threats about snapping Yi's limbs and tossing him into the nearest river, clearing his throat since Xiao Shang had witnessed his heroic defense of Cien. He might be facing a paycheck shrinkage soon. Yi dropped a truth bomb on Qian, revealing that her dad was undoubtedly the family's biggest headache. Boy, did her dad know how to turn embarrassment into an art form. Then Xiao chimes in with wisdom only 1,000 5-year-olds could muster. He insisted there wasn't a magic trick to boosting skills. Yi wasn't having any of it, calling him out since she caught him red-handed gossiping with Hong. He tried to brush it off coolly, claiming it wasn't a matter of wanting to share, it was a state secret. She threw down an ultimatum: spill the juicy details or she'd refuse to go home. Talk about putting him in a jam internally. Yi chuckled at the irony. He was all about classified info, yet could easily drop the truth. Plus, he was yapping about top-secret stuff, with Hong completely clueless that his daughter was eavesdropping like a pro. Xiao Shang finally broke it down for her, saying there was a legit way to level up and snag shiny new skills. A decade ago, during the face-off with the Level 2 channel, a few folks actually hit the jackpot with a second upgrade and unlocked some wild new powers. Back then, researchers agreed it was thanks to warm, cozy chats mixed with high radiation from that Level 2 channel. But those were just rare gems. The chances for advanced folks soaking in that radiation for ages were less than 1 in 100. That's why he was dodging the truth with his daughter. If that were true, that level 2 channel popping up might as well be a human-induced catastrophe waiting to happen. He confessed that both he and General Hong were raising eyebrows at Xiai's questionable experiments trying to open that level 2 channel, but it felt like a shot in the dark. Even if Shiha was loony enough to give it a whirl, it would require a full army of willing or perhaps slightly insane participants. And surely not many folks were that excited to tango with death. Meanwhile, Shiha was glued to his screen, watching the madness unfold. He asked the researcher named Matt if the test subjects below looked like they were scared out of their minds. Matt just shrugged, saying they seemed pretty chill, but Shai knew those folks were trembling in their shoes. They might have been playing it cool because they were convinced the radiation was just a magic potion to supercharge them, not a trip to the afterlife. One guy even yelled up swearing he wouldn't sign up again. The poor guy in that containment cell was begging for medicine. He knew that taking a radiation bath without it would be a one-way ticket to doom. He tried convincing Shiha that he still had value. Shihao recognized that without their medicine, those folks were toast, even if they leveled up to S rank. He thought it was a real shame that their healing supplies were lagging like a tortoise in a race. With any more subjects, they would run out of food to keep everyone well fed. Otherwise, they could whip up an elite squad of S-rank heroes ready to take on the universe. In Shur's lab, he watched as a mystical gate creaked open. The radiation levels were shooting up like crazy. It hit 90%, then zoomed straight to 96 and 97. He was practically bouncing out of his chair as the numbers climbed, and when it finally hit 100%, that level 2 channel burst open wide. All systems were running smoother than a greased pig. He felt a rush like never before, and everyone was celebrating as if they just scored the winning touchdown. But just as the celebration was getting out of this world, an alarm blared. A wave of alien beasts had been spotted. The first one strutted out looking like they meant business. The researchers quickly tagged them as S-rank beasts from the beastly race. Shiha smirked, wondering why everyone was losing their cool when they all had God's blood pumping in their veins. He figured the beasts wouldn't dare to mess with them. Those beasts casually strolled away from the channel. Matt warned Shiha that if they ignored the creatures, they'd probably wander right into Haicheng City. And to Shihao, that was music to his ears. Let those beasts rumble with the good folks of Haicheng. He had a gut feeling that with all that radiation, he wouldn't be an S rank for long. And once he pulled it off, he was planning to give Haicheng a whole new look. Meanwhile, the military was on patrol, keeping an eagle eye on anything suspicious. One brave soldier assured the captain that everything was all good since they'd been having a repeat patrol all day long. He was brimming with confidence until bam. 1 second he was standing tall, and the next he dropped like a sack of potatoes faster than you could say thunder. The Thunderworld A-rank creature had taken him out without breaking a sweat, sending everyone into a frenzy when they finally connected the dots. They quickly shot the alert back to headquarters, letting them know Squad 6 was under siege. Right after the report, all that was left in the air were screams. Meanwhile, Xiao Shang was trying his best to sweet-talk his daughter into coming back home, but she was having none of it. Qian and Yi could sense something was off. Qian spotted him sneaking out of the living room, followed him, asking what was the deal. Yi shouted for Qian to save her. He then faced off against the Tiger Wolf Bank beast that had somehow wandered into their living room. They exchanged punches like they were in a martial arts flick. Ye thought he could land a sweet strike, but the beast just leapt out of the way. To his utter shock, it got zapped mid-air thanks to Xiaoang's quick thinking. He was scratching his head about how on earth that beast got into his home. The sky turned a fiery red, lighting up the scene like a horror movie. That red glow, just a military flare announcing absolute chaos. Ye had a light bulb moment. He could sense beasts prowling all over the city. Xiaoang, Yi, and Si rushed over to the military temporary command post in Haicheng. General Hong stood tall, instructing everyone to brace themselves. By that point, the 6th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 8th patrols, along with the 3rd defense zone, were all under attack. Most of the beasts were busy outside the wall, but 2 breaks had occurred. They organized the troops to take back their spots. Signs of an A-level beast had shown up. Reports of multiple sightings around the city center were rolling in. With that many critters popping up out of nowhere, Xiao Shang knew they were gearing up for a full-blown beast wave. Ye scratched his head, wondering where in the General Hong asked everyone to hang on tight. At that moment, the 6th, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 8th patrols and the 3rd defense zone were all under attack. Most of the beasts were kicking up a storm outside the defensive walls, and 2 areas had been compromised. They rallied the troops to reclaim those spots. Signs of an A-level beast had been spotted, multiple sightings popped up in the city center, and with that many beasts lurking around, Xiao Shang knew it was a genuine beast tide. Ye wondered where all those cute little critters even came from. Moments later, multiple monsters popped up in the city center. With all these furry friends showing up, Xiao Shang recognized it was definitely a beast wave. Ye asked, puzzled, where all those little rascals had come from. Then, just a minute later, General Hong strutted in like he owned the place. He called Xiaoang to the frontline command center and kicked Xin back to Longmen 3rd Street. Even though there weren't any beasts crashing the party at that moment, he wasn't about to let any surprise guests ruin the festivities. Xiaoang asked Ye if he was flying solo or sticking with her, but he was cool with whichever. Still, General Hong had other plans and ordered him to hang tight. Ye handed over the adorable little critter they called Tamu Toothless. Just in case things got a little crazy, that tiny monster looked like it had seen better days. Just look at that face, not ugly at all, definitely cute as a button. She reminded him to stay safe, and he gave her head a reassuring pat, telling her not to sweat it. Meanwhile, Xiaoang's dad popped up and caught sight of them. Xiaoang's dad, the ultimate protective parent, shot Ye a glare that could singe hair, while General Hong's aide desperately tried to defuse the situation. Xiaoang and Ye waved their goodbyes, and General Hong joked that it felt great to be young and reckless. After that, General Hong spilled the beans about the beast tide, no joke. With heavy artillery on standby, everyone from S to A levels needed to be at the ready, prepped for action. I realized General Hong had just dropped some intel he probably shouldn't have. He could see the general was up to some sneaky business. So he asked about his top-secret mission. General Hong got a bit twitchy, but admitted that beasts had crashed the military academy, and he was counting on Ye to save the day, the students, and possibly make a sandwich while he was at it. Ye jumped on board and got moving. General Hong raised an eyebrow, shocked that Ye didn't even ask what type of beasts they were up against. Ye had it all under control. He figured only 1 or 2 A-level beasts slipped in, and as long as they didn't jump him all at once, he believed he could handle it. General Hong decided to wait and see if they'd get some good news. Once Ye was out the door, he turned to Xiao Shang, who was still seething with rage. He asked why he held him back. General Hong's aide told Xiao Shang to chill. They were in a military HQ after all. General Hong joked that Xiao Shang wouldn't stand a chance against his future son-in-law. Xiao Shang scoffed back, claiming he was an A-level. But General Hong sensed that Kid had some serious skills, possibly enough to dance with an S level. Meanwhile, at a nearby camp, the soldiers were mumbling about how sneaky the beasts were, ambushing the rescue teams whenever they got too comfortable. The soldiers were feeling a bit humiliated. If it weren't for the trapped students, they would have already blown that place to Kingdom Come. Suddenly, news flashed in from headquarters. Reinforcements had arrived. The 2 soldiers asked if it was an A-level powerhouse, but the messenger sheepishly admitted it was just a minor A-level. This sent the soldiers into a fit. They were at least B-level leading teams and still leaving battle with bruises. What was an E-level going to do for them? They figured it was some pampered prince trying to snag a shiny badge for his collection. They decided to toss him aside because they didn't need any extra baggage. The messenger went pale when he spotted a beast lurking behind the 2 soldiers. Before they knew what hit them, Ye leaped in and sliced that beast into confetti. The soldiers were left gawking. They had no idea they were dinner. Ye couldn't believe they had the nerve to doubt him, considering their utter lack of vigilance. One soldier asked the messenger again if Ye was truly an E-level, and the messenger confirmed with trembly hands that his record said he was a minor E-level. They were in shock he could take down a beast at B-level. Ye ordered them to stand guard and insisted the rescue efforts were all his. He dashed towards the soldiers, knowing the beasts were sly enough to stay hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. Now it made sense why the search teams kept getting ambushed. Qing Tian remarked that those beasts were smarter than bugs. Their brain power was in S-rank territory, just like his. Ironically, he couldn't tell if King Tian was handing out compliments or just throwing shade. Suddenly, feeling a shift in the air, he leaped onto a rooftop and spotted a guy who was having a face-off with a beast. The man was cornered against the wall and noticed a trash can nearby. He unleashed his powers and transformed it into a sword. This brave fellow was a C rank with some impressive metal shaping skills. Ye quickly realized the kid had talent that was anything but ordinary. With his sword in hand, the man was ready to face off with the beast. But bam! The monster took a swing and snapped his sword like a twig, sending him crashing into the wall like a soggy noodle. Now he was nursing his arm, wallowing in self-pity over his seemingly useless skills. Even though he was C rank, he felt like a total loser, just as everyone said. To his surprise, a voice chimed in saying whether he's truly trash depended on his actions, not on what other people thought. It was Ye, and he ripped that monster to shreds like it was nothing. Afterward, he reached out a hand to the man, letting him know they were almost at the rescue team's base. He asked if the guy wanted to take refuge there or join him in saving more people. The man gratefully accepted his hand, eager to help because he had a knack for tracking down students in hiding. Ye welcomed him and introduced himself. The man introduced himself as Lu Hei, a student from the logistics class. Meanwhile, the other students huddled in the storage room wondering if Lu Hei had found any help. A blonde guy responded with a chuckle, claiming that the loser wouldn't make it back alive with the rescue team. He was sure Lu. He went off to track down the missing students. Ye greeted him and introduced himself. The guy said he was Lu Hei, a student from the logistics class. Meanwhile, the rest of the group in the storage room were left speculating if Lu Hei had brought any backup. But the blonde guy rolled his eyes, saying there's no chance that loser could find the rescue team and return intact. He was convinced he would have been toast before he even took his second step. The bald guy who overheard him got all worked up over that comment. Wuha, the blonde dude, kept insisting he wasn't wrong since Lu was like rocking a C rank with a seriously lame skill, yet still fancied himself a hero looking for help. Talk about signing up for a one-way trip to trouble. The blonde guy wished he had just gone along instead of just sitting there twiddling his thumbs while listening to Hao's ridiculous rambling. Hao jumped in claiming he was just asking for trouble because he was way too weak. He reminded him they were supposed to stick around and keep everyone safe, which clearly made the most sense. While they were busy squabbling, they totally missed the door swinging open. Ye sauntered in and casually commented on how rare it was to find someone who could make being a chicken sound so dignified. Hao felt like he'd been slapped and shot back, but before he could even wind up for a punch, Ye had already dealt him a whammy and sent him flying. Hao was in total freak-out mode, begging him not to step any closer. He even tried to act tough by name-dropping his dad. Ye just rolled his eyes, saying he couldn't care less about who his dad was, and that if he kept babbling, he wouldn't mind if one less weirdo vanished into thin air. The bald guy sighed the breath of relief when he saw Lu was okay. Lu jumped in, saying he only made it back in one piece, thanks to Ye swooping in to do the whole saving and healing routine. The ladies in the room were thrilled someone had come to rescue them, but Ye quickly set the record straight. He made it clear he wasn't there to play Superman. Nope, he came to whip them into shape and transform them into real soldiers. The 4 students were left in total shock. Ye added that they were going to learn how to find their friend's team up for combat and fight their way out like total champions. Thanks a bunch for tuning in. Be sure to check out the next Giga Chad video, and I'll catch you all later. Also, don't forget to show some love by joining the Summon Club membership. Should form combat squads and fight their way out. Huge thanks to everyone for tuning in. Be sure to check out the next Giga Chad video, and I'll catch you all next time. Also consider supporting the channel by joining the Summon Club membership. His membership